Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grim Flayer. Hope you're all doing very well today, and I hope you're ready for a first on this channel. For the first time ever, I am bringing you gameplay from a modern challenge. It's the first time I've ever played one, too. We'll talk about exactly what a challenge is briefly, for those who don't know. We'll also talk about a couple changes we made to the list since the last time you've seen it, for good old-fashioned BG the Rock. But first, I gotta show you something sweet. If you haven't seen my Christmas message video, you may not be aware of this, but the channel is officially sponsored. Good times, and very excited about that. The sponsor, you're looking at his magnificent artwork here. It is BrianPalmerArt.com. Brian has very unique, very stylistically pleasing tokens, playmats, and he does commissions as well. And if you are interested in availing yourself of his wonderful products, Grimflayer MTG is in the description, as are the links to all of his stuff. Grimflayer MTG is your discount code for 10% off. So you save money, you help Brian out, and you help me out by using that code. So thank you, Brian, for supporting and sponsoring this content. Please, my friends, do check that out. Follow Brian on social media as well to stay abreast of any possible giveaways or specials that he's doing. Brian is a dedicated BGXer. I'm the first channel he's sponsored, and he's my first sponsor. And it's a match made in heaven, because we both know that BGX is where it's at. So that's the sponsorship for the channel. You gotta love it. And let's talk about the list. Main deck, I believe, is completely unchanged from the last time you saw me play Rock on the channel. But in the sideboard, we have made a couple of changes. I have come to realize that Surgical Extraction is more poorly positioned than I'd like, partially because the combo decks where you're going to win the game by surgicaling are fewer and further between these days, and partially because the graveyard decks are less vulnerable to surgical and more vulnerable to a total clear out by something like Nihil Spellbomb. Finally, Nihil Spellbomb in general is just more along the lines of what our deck wants to do, with the fact that it's value positive. So Spellbomb has replaced Extraction. Spellbomb 2 has replaced Extraction number 1. We have also added a copy of Veil of Summer. I don't think this card should exist. I don't think it should ever have been printed. I would not be surprised to see it get banned in Modern, to be honest, and I certainly wouldn't be sad about it. But while it's here, even though it doesn't necessarily fit that well with our deck, like we're playing traditionally 1, 2, 3 along the curve, a lot at sorcery speed, and we're doing things like +1ing Liliana sometimes, so attrition. Our attrition plan is not necessarily a great fit for Veil. It's still good enough, it's still powerful enough against the meta right now that I think we should be playing one, so there we go. Now, a Modern Challenge, for those who don't know, is a premier event on MTGO, and it is higher stakes. I believe it's 3 times as expensive to enter it, and the prizes are also much more significant. I have never done one before, despite the fact that I've been playing a Modern for you for at least a year on this channel, I think, because they only happen on Saturdays, and literally every Saturday of my life, I'm either at work or I have gotten the day off of work to attend a family function of some kind. But I finally, last week, had a Saturday free for once, had to play a Modern Challenge. Now, I'll be perfectly honest with you, a big part of me said maybe I should be playing Jund or Mono Red Prowess. Those are both decks I've been playing, added to my repertoire recently. I own them, and I frankly, as much as I hate to say it, as much as I always love 2-color Rock, 2-color green-black, I do think those decks are both a little bit better positioned than straight Golgari Midrange right now. Specifically on Prowess, my win rate has been sky high. It's been amazing. But you know what, guys? BG is my jam. It's what got us this far. It is also the deck I've most recently 5-0'd with. So I said, you know what? First ever challenge, we've got to play the Rock, right? Nothing else to be done but jam the Rock. So we made those couple tweaks, and we played a Modern Challenge. The other thing about the challenges is they are 7 rounds. At least this one was 7 rounds. I think it can go sometimes 6, sometimes 8, depending on the number of participants, and then if you make top 8, you play an elimination playoff from there. So anyway, that is what we did last week, and I'm here to bring you the replay right now. Thank you so much to all Patreon supporters who do make this content possible, and let's get straight into some gameplay. Alright guys, it's round 1, game 1, we're on the play, and we've got a nice balanced opening hand, double Thoughtseize and a blind game 1, you know, as long as we're not against burn, it should be pretty good. So we're gonna keep. I am gonna try to go through these games quicker than is customary for my BGX replays, just because we are playing 7 rounds. So, turn 1, Swamp Thoughtseize, and we see that we're against Amulet Titan. Oh joy. What a pleasure to run into big mana round 1 when I'm on mid-range. Yeah, love to see it, right? Anyway, EE is the only non-redundant thing in their hand. They've got Azusa and Azusa, so taking an extra one doesn't do much, especially because it's not like they have a ton of bounce. They don't have any bounce lands. They can't really go off with her yet. So I like taking EE. That allows us to get aggressive with our threats. I will point out Flagstones of Trocare. This is not common technology in Amulet Titan at all, so we're kind of expecting some shenanigans here. Back to us, we draw Trophy. Good card in the matchup, but it's just Scooz time for now. Try to start bashing face with our Grizzly Bear. Opponent gets a free Once Upon a Time into Elvish Reclaimer. So, definitely into non-stock territory here. Reclaimer becomes a 3/4 if they've got lands in the graveyard, 3 or more to be exact, and it can sack a land to tutor for a land. That's kind of good in Amulet Titan anyway, because they've got a host of utility lands and they can find bounce lands if they need them, but also specifically combos with Flagstones of Trocare. So that's Elvish Reclaimer seems like a card we want to kill. Sadly, we can't do it. We don't want to trophy that for sure. We don't have any other kills, so we just get in with Scooz, and we play Tracker. Tracker is the most proactive clock here. Opponent plays their Azusa. They found a bounce land too, so they're kind of finding a lot of the stuff they didn't have, like another value piece in the form of Reclaimer plus a bounce land. So you don't love to see that. And I do feel, even though playing Tarmogoyf is pretty live here, it's a fine draw. I want to be more mana efficient, right? So this lets us do 3 things. Number 1, we're attacking their mana. We're stopping the bounce land ramp. Number 2, we make a clue. And number 3, we Thoughtseize. We know that at least that Azusa is in hand. But as it turns out, the opponent found another Elvish Reclaimer, so we'll go ahead and take that Reclaimer and leave them with just Azusa and Talaria West in hand, but they don't have any blue mana. So our position's pretty good, but our clock's very slow. For both of those reasons, I like attacking with both here. Because number 1, we've got to clock them, and number 2, if they do double block like they did here, well, that's a way to take care of the Reclaimer, stop them from fixing their mana. But, of course, they promptly top deck another Reclaimer. That said, they're still not really up to all that much. They still don't have 6 mana quite yet. You know, they still need to top deck a payoff. So, you know, if we had been clocking a little bit better, our position might be good. But for now, all we're doing is attacking, missing the 4th land drop for a couple turns now. It's not ideal. And even though, you know, whatever, we could kill the Reclaimer with Swift End, we just got to start clocking. So I just jam the Goyf here. Opponent top decks a bounce land. Obviously, that's really pretty scary. Now they've got the mana they need, they can do some Reclaimer shenanigans too, perhaps. So, because Reclaimer and Flagstones is kind of uncharted territory, it's certainly not stock, I've never seen it, I decided to just attack first and to see what they'd do. Kind of force them to make the first move. We can hold up Trophy this way if we need to, like, Trophy a really problematic land. Opponent will go get extra Flagstones, they'll cash in the one that was already tapped. They go get a Temple Garden, so okay, no real shenanigans with that. Therefore, I decide to just Swift End after blocks to save the Scooz and to deal with the Reclaimer once and for all. So, opponent really needs to top deck something good here. We're finally putting a lot of pressure on. And look at that, instant top deck of Prime Time. You hate to see it. You really hate to see it. And we were worried about Field of the Dead maybe being the find off of Reclaimer, but they're just going to go get Field and Vesuva off of Titan, and now they have 2 fields, so we really can't beat this. I am going to play it out. We do have to trophy the Titan, because that's the number 1 card we can't beat, but we need to just draw straight fields and trophies, and then we still have a lot of zombies to deal with. So I'm just going to hit play here. We're going on the dig. We do have 1 Plague Engineer, but only 1 main deck, so we cannot wipe the zombies. all we can do is present a big board trying to contend with them, while the opponent goes off, getting more value off of Flagstones and Reclaimer and Field of the Dead. It's kind of a miserable play pattern to face, I'm not gonna lie. Questing Beast is pretty good, actually, against the zombie tokens, but they just have so many of them that I believe we were dead on board if we didn't play Plague Man that turn. But they just don't stop gassing out. They drew a Summoner's Pact. They packed for a Titan, and that's just a lot of zombies. That's just a lot of value. So, again, we're still kind of making them execute all of this, but they actually have a pretty nifty turn here where they get Bojuka Bog, they exile themselves, will get our value out of their yard before that resolves, but then they bounce it and replay it, and they exile us, and our Goyfs go from like 6-7 or whatever they were to 0-1, and we just, instead of just assigning chump blocks, we're just dead. We just scoop. So, I'll just get this rant out of the way early. Big mana. A lot of people say that big mana is the boogeyman of the format, in that a lot of the things that become problems that eventually need to get banned, anything from KCI to Faithless Looting to Hogak. Now, don't get me wrong, some of these things kind of deserve to be banned in a vacuum, but other things you might argue that big mana is the great warper of the format. Control decks and mid-range decks could maybe police the other stuff if we didn't have this huge shadow of big mana looming over us, and if we didn't have to dedicate so many slots and so much deck structure in general to competing with these decks that go way over the top of us. So big mana perhaps being the the single greatest warping archetype of the modern format, and you can see why when you play a game like this. It's just like, okay, really a million zombie tokens and the Titans and all the rest, but that's okay, it's a part of Modern, we do have the tools to compete with it. Let's check out Game 2. Alright guys, so because this video is pretty long, I am just going to, instead of cutting to a sideboard separate screen and going in depth, I'm just going to quickly touch on it here. So, as you can see, we've sided out 1 Fatal Push, 1 Brutality, 1 Unearth, 1 Tracker, and 2 Scavenging Ooze. We're bringing in the Land Hate, we're bringing in Fulminator and Ashiok, and some other stuff, but those are the most important ones. And the one thing I do want to briefly touch on is that normally you'd side out more copies of Fatal Push than just 1, but because they're on Elvish Reclaimer and maybe some other lower curve push targets, I did leave in 3 copies. So that's the main thing to notice here. And we also have to mulligan a 1-lander, where the 1 land is simply a forest. We mulligan to a pretty decent 6 with a triple Bob. I think bottoming 1 Bob is fine here. And we get to curve out. We get to go Hexdrinker into Dark Confidant. If we ever draw the 3rd land, Assassin's Trophy will be live, and Field of Ruin will be live, and these are 2 pretty good cards in the matchup. So, opponent also mulliganed. That's a beautiful thing. They'll Once Upon a Time for a breeding pool that they'll play. And we draw Inquisition. There's always a little bit of a consideration to Inquisition there, specifically because Hexdrinker is really nice, allowing us to have a mana-efficient turn. That said, I did still opt for the Dark Confidant there. Really need to guarantee we hit our 3rd land drop. Surely we'll do it now, right? No, we will not. So, we draw Tarmogoyf, we draw Thoughtseize, these are good cards, but man, no 3rd land is so punishing. So we could play another Bob, we could play another Goyf, but I think I was starting to feel that my Inquisition is kind of like now or never. Turns out that's not the case because they have a ton of low curve stuff, but it's also kind of true that we need to use it to stave off some really scary stuff, and Azusa, backed up by that hand with a Summoner's Pact, is really scary. Scary enough that we kind of have to take her. And then we get to put a level on Hexy, we get to bash. That's all well and good. Here comes Oko. This was always going to be their play, most likely. And, I mean, just missing the 3rd land yet again, it's just simply ridiculous. We don't really have anything else to do besides play Tarmogoyf. Obviously, Thoughtseize is live, but we've got to start going wide against this Oko. Now I attacked in what I thought was kind of an interesting way. We send 2 damage over at Oko, and 2 damage at face, because we do want to race them. We can't let them just suck up all of our damage with Oko, but we also need to tick him down a peg so he doesn't just take control of our Tarmogoyf. So that's kind of the play there. Oko will make food into an elk, and will play Ramanop Excavator and a bounce land, so they're playing like a nice mid-range game against us right now. And how many cards have we drawn? We haven't seen the third land. We've been drawing 2 per turn since we had Bob. Just, like, ridiculous. A little bit ridiculous. Our only good attack is with Goyf. Even this is not a great attack, but we are at least bluffing Fatal Push, making the opponent think about it. And they decide not to block, not to call our bluff. That's great for us. And we're just ignoring Oko at this point. We're attacking. We gotta just try to squeeze over the line. I think we've officially lost the value game because we've been so far behind for so long. So we're leaving Oko around to maybe take control of something, but I think we kind of got to do that. At least they'll be cashing him in to do it. We will then Inquisition. I think that's probably the better play than Bob because we know the Summoner's Pact is in hand, and it's a good time to get it. And they have Force of Vigor, so at least that's a card they sided in that's not really accomplishing much against us. And once again, we just put a level on Hexy and pass. It's about all we got. So, opponent rips Azusa off the top, and that lets them dump out their hand pretty well. And it also lets them swap Azusa with Hexdrinker, and Azusa being worse than the food token, the elk. So Bob finally does it. He hits us our third land. You love to see that. We'll attack with the Tarmogoyf. Again, bluffing here, and not even just bluffing anymore. We could trophy something if they go for a multi-block. Instead, they'll just chump with the elk. Ironically enough, now that we finally have our third land, our best play is actually just to do this. It's to play Goyf. We could also Thoughtseize too, but I didn't, and I'll show you why. So it's because I kind of like am all in on fading a really bomb top deck. We probably can't beat that anyway. And so if we do fade the top deck, we also have to fade losing to the Hexdrinker swing plus our Bob trigger. And that's exactly what they go for. So they're getting an unblockable 6 in. And if we had Thoughtseized, we would then be at 1, because we would have had Defection Shock, and we'd be likely to die to our Bob trigger on average. Instead, now there's nothing that can kill us off of Bob, because QB's already in hand. It's our only 4-drop. So the opponent lets the trigger resolve, then just scoops it up. That was apparently their plan to victory. I don't know if they had a better line of trying to stay back with Hexdrinker. It's unclear to me, but I guess with us having an entirely full grip, it's probably fair for them to assume they kind of have to go for the win there, right? So I don't know if it was better to them to maybe try to take Tarmogoyf because we wouldn't have the mana to make Hexdrinker that good. It's hard to say. So whether the opponent left percentage points on the table, I do not know. But I do know that it just shows you the power of being proactive. We stumbled. We had a super, super weak... I better close that up. We had a super weak progression in terms of utilizing everything optimally, and we still got over the line just because we went turn 1 Savannah Lions, turn 2 Dark Confidant. We kept the pressure up, so it was an ugly win, but a win nevertheless. Quick note on the sideboard here before we go to Game 3, guys. I subbed out a Plague Engineer for this Game 3. It is worse on the draw at doing anything, really, besides beating Field of Ruin. Like, it's worse at killing Tribe Scout. Damage will certainly be done with them on the play by then. Worse at doubling up to kill Elvish Reclaimer, things like this. So being on the draw and also having seen Ramanop Excavator, among other things, we do bring in Vraska Golgari Queen. Don't know how good she's going to be, but she's got a lot of targets against this variant of Titan, right? So look at our opening hand. Triple discard, Field of Ruin, 3 lands, and Fulminator Mage. It's very good. Opponent will Once Upon a Time for a bounce land, and it's time to Inquisition. We see another Once Upon a Time, Azusa Lost But Seeking, and a Chameleon Colossus, which is a very good card against us. Not very common tech, but we just take the thing that they can play next turn. So we are all in on just ripping apart the hand, and we drew yet another Thoughtseize. Might not be a good draw, but they're quadrupling down on our plan here, right? So it's a great start, and we've got Fulminator to follow it up, but we still don't have a threat. We'll see what the opponent rips. They're in total top deck mode. They don't have any gas in hand, and they immediately draw Elvish Reclaimer, which looks like a bit of a problem to me. And we immediately draw an answer to it in the form of Abrupt Decay. Now, there are other things we might want to decay later, but again, they're in total top deck mode, so I'm pretty comfortable just decaying the elf. Then it's back to us. We're going to Thoughtseize just to clear the way for like Veil of Summer or something. They just drew another land, so now we've got the free and clear to play Fulminator Mage, and I do decide to just Stone Rain their blue land. That's going to make a lot of their other draws worse. We're also keeping them further away from field this way, and on top of that, we have Field of Ruin in our hand. So they just play a land and pass. We really wanted to draw a threat, and we have. We've drawn Tarmogoyf. Very good draw. So on the draw step, we are going to continue attacking their colors. Again, you could hit field here. It's a little more appealing to hit field with our field now, but I did just decide to hit Temple Garden. They might be on Path to Exile, so taking them off of white's pretty good. But holy moly, could they possibly have top-decked anything better? I really doubt it. Ramanap Excavator, single-handedly just going to reverse our entire game plan heretofore, basically, so that sucks. And we draw Thoughtseize. Probably gonna whiff, so a pretty dead one. But we are alive to maybe erase them with Goyf, maybe stave off some great top decks from the opponent. But they have Reclamation Sage. Rec Sage, Force of Vigor, they've got a lot of this artifact hate in. I don't know how good it is against us. In general. I mean, against my build, it's pretty dead, right? But the 2-1 body is a 2-1 body, and they also got Amulet of Vigor, so maybe my Thoughtseize looks like it would have hit something last turn, but I did decide to hold it. But we're just bricking, We're just bricking. What are you going to do? Draw a fetch land, not the best. So opponents continuing to make their land drops. It's much better for them to do so for obvious reasons than for us. And we're just kind of racing. 4 to you, 4 back to you. Treetop Village, yeah, that helps us race, technically, but I could think of many better draws than that, but at least it's not a dead one. Opponent coming back across, putting us down to 6 here. It's coming right down to the wire. It's kind of an intense game with both decks seemingly breaking a little bit. We draw Assassin's Trophy. Okay, this is a super interesting spot. So we are going to attack with both. We are going to put them to 1. And that means that either thing connecting next turn is lethal, and Treetop Village has Trample. And a lot of people forget about that. So even though in some ways it's a little bit better to sit back and try to block, I don't even know how good that is. They've got the inevitability of Field of the Dead coming out, so I do decide just to attack, especially because they could be sitting on removal. And sure enough, they are. So not only has Ramanap Excavator completely rolled back everything that we were doing, it also got them back onto white. Well, never mind, I guess they had white from Gemstone Mine, but either way, them drawing a path is a huge beating here. Huge beating. So another interesting spot here. Basically, if we let them go to their main phase, they're going to start making zombies off Field of the Dead. If we trophy Field of the Dead, we stave that off for 1 turn, unless they draw like an Azusa, but they just get to buy it back. Either way, we're dead in 2 hits, and they're not dead on the crackback. So I think either way, it doesn't quite matter what we do here. We kind of need to draw either like Questing Beast or like some kill spells or some other way to stabilize. So I did, just decide to trophy the field because it's more of a sure thing. It's probably better than trying to do anything else at this stage of the game, but regardless, we are kind of all in on our top deck here, and it's another Verdant Catacombs, so what a way to lose round 1 of our first ever Premier event. We run into these rather tilting big mana decks, and we just brick so hard at the end of it, it's unbelievable. With like 5 dead draws in a row, or medium to dead draws in a row. And I think it all would have been fine if the opponent didn't have Ramanap Excavator, but that not only allowed them to help race us, it also allowed them to bring all those lands back, and that's just a little bit rough. But if we had gassed out just a tad more, I think we still could have gotten there, because they weren't seeming to hit their big bombs, and we almost won the race, even despite our total lack of good top decks in the latter half of the game. So that's a rough one, guys. It really is. But you know what? These things happen. The league, the challenge is young. Let's keep our chin up. Let's go to round 2. We've lost the die roll this time, and it's a fine hand in a blind game 1. We've got a lot of disruption of a variety of types. We've got a threat, and we've got a Thoughtseize. It's a good hand. Opponent will fetch a basic. Go Gilded Goose, Mox Opal. Oh, okay, so it's one of these decks. It's one of these decks, huh? Let's find out exactly what kind. With a Thoughtseize, we see a pretty Thoughtseize-proof hand, frankly. They've got a duplicate Mox Opal, and they've got 2 Okos. So yeah, relatively Thoughtseize-proof, but taking an Oko is still pretty good here, especially because we have Abrupt Decay to answer the other one. So they play it out. They also play out the Inventor's Fair that they drew, and they make a food token, but we will go ahead and decay Oko before he gets too much value. So the opponent in total top deck mode, they don't have any threats, any gas left in hand, but our mana woes continue. We continue missing our 3rd land drop. That sucks, but hey, at least we got the Goyf. At least we got the Goyf to play. That's certainly the correct play there. And they get the Goose value on the end step. And they're gaining a life per turn with Inventor's Fair, so our Goyf's clock will be blunted between the Fair and the food tokens. And they top deck Thopter Foundry, so we see that they are incorporating the combo in at least a splash, the Thopter Sword combo. And we draw a 3-drop instead of our 3rd land. Bad times here. But we will attack, and we've got kind of a nifty play here, so we'll make the opponent assign blocks. They decline to, and then before damage, we're going to trophy the Foundry, because, look, this is just going to generate a good amount of value on its own. It's also the game-winning combo piece, and all that. So they will sack it to make a Thopter and get a little bit of value, but we also grew the Goyf that way. So that was a decent turn, I guess. Obviously, we could hope for better, but it's all right. Opponent getting a cheeky chip back at us with a Thopter. Then they're passing. Got a couple unknowns in hand, and we just keep drawing 3-drops without our 3rd land. It's just kind of how our league's been going so far. But Tarmogoyf will pull a lot of weight when our deck's not pulling, when the rest of our deck's not pulling weight. Sadly, they have found Icefang Coatl, which is one of the very best ways to trade up with the Goyf. We are therefore kind of priced into trophying that, because like our hand is too clunked up, it's too slow to really do anything but try to race, so we've got to give them the 3-for-1 by trophying the cantripping 2-drop, just so our Goyf can keep bashing, and that's where we're at. So we're hoping the opponent hasn't really drawn much, but they've drawn Karn the Great Creator. Pretty annoying. Interestingly, they just tick up. They don't tutor anything. They don't make anything into a creature. They just add a loyalty and pass. So, and that doesn't even get it out of Goyf range, so they are still priced into the chump block here. So I guess we're going to make them do that. And then we could do one of two things here. We could just play the Scoos to keep going wide, or we could try to get some real value out of our clunked up hand, having drawn yet another 3-drop. I opt for the latter. Like, killing the Goose is a way to go wide, kind of. Like, we can make a creature, or we could kill one of theirs. For the purposes of pressuring Karn, it is going wide in a way. We also get to have a super efficient turn. All 3 modes are potentially live right now, especially because they're on main deck Thopter Foundry. They might have a Whir in hand or something. So we just go for it, but the opponent blows us out super hard with a Metallic Rebuke. So if you're at all kind of even on resources, you don't want to risk getting blown out with a brutality like that into potential permission. That was on my radar, but honestly, I'm cool with the decision, right? Like, those cards aren't doing anything anyway for us, so. Opponent's going to tick down. They're going to find an Ensnaring Bridge. They're going to dump out their other Mox Opal just to keep the hand low. And then it's back to us, and we finally, at long last, we draw the 3rd land. And just because we are wary of them untapping and having permission become more alive, we do go for the Swift End on Karn right now, and that resolves. So that's something. That's a start. We've taken care of Karn, and now we got to take care of Ensnaring Bridge. We got to find a way to do that. But opponent has a Whir of Invention. They were for Sword of the Meek, which is a very strange Whir target, unless they have another Thopter Foundry in hand, so we got to assume that was their last remaining card. It sure was. So here's the combo. Thopter Sword. We got to find an out right now. We don't have it. It's a Field of Ruin. Field takes care of Inventor's Fair before they can tutor something else with it. Maybe a way to protect the combo or whatever. But it's a decent turn for us, Field into Scoos. Scoos at least makes them respect their activations a little bit more, but they're getting a huge life buffer here. They are just kind of also generating an army to close out the game within 2 or 3 turns. So we're kind of all in now on first drawing Plague Engineer to stop the Thopters from going off, and secondly, then finding an Ensnaring Bridge before they can get more value. Instead, we find a land, so we tick Liliana up, get more information, get cards out of their hand, and start working toward an ult, maybe buying a turn, forcing them to attack her, but they're just kind of going off. We hope they give us we hope they misplay here and give us an opportunity to eat the sword with Ooze. But instead, they're just going a little bit more cautious than that. And they'll attack. They're going to do exactly 8 to us here in the air, so we gain exactly 1 life to stay alive with the Ooze, leaving the activation up. But again, we're kind of all in on drawing Plague Man, and they have an Urza anyway, with making a 16/16 construct. So as if they didn't have enough going on, they get to do that, and we top deck a Scooze as well. So I take my actions here. I make them play it out, because note that we are already 5 minutes ahead on the clock, so we're very, very dead, but we just make them execute this final attack, and then that is going to be that for us. So, oof, that was pretty tough, you know. The opponent top-decked pretty well, frankly. We were just stuck for way too long without really doing much, so what are you going to do? It can be a little bit tough game 1 sometimes anyway, but certainly when things go like that, we are not favored. You know, Goyf definitely was proactive enough to make them have some good stuff. They found the good stuff, they stabilized, and then they comboed off. So they got us good, and that's about that. So there we go. Let's go on to game 2, try to redeem ourselves here. Alright guys, so it's very important against Urza decks to sideboard against specifically what you see, and what we saw is that they're pretty all in on the combo. This is like a true Urza deck. They probably have at least 2 copies of Thopter Foundry main. So to that end, we are more interested in Plague Engineer than we would be against Simic or Sultai Urza. We bring in both Plague Men, we bring in both Ouphes and Choke and Vraska. All of those things should pretty much be in against any Urza Oko variant for sure, but we also want both Plague Men. So out comes 2 Scoozes, Tracker, Unearth, and 2 copies of Liliana of the Veil. Veil of Summer was a borderline card, but I thought on the play, we'll keep 2 Lilianas in. Veil is, I think Veil is better against the more value Urza decks. This one with the combo, you could see Veil being a little bit high variance, so on the play I opted to be more proactive and less reactive. And we've got like a super tempting 1-lander, because if we hit a second land right off the top, it's a good hand. But it's also pretty risky to do that on the play, so I decided to throw it back. We've got a pretty good 60 post side. I think we can do better on 6. And we've got a pretty sweet 6. We will go ahead and bottom that Scooze, and we've got 2 great threats, 2 lands, and 2 discard spells. You've got to love it. However, the opponent has a hand that is kind of uniquely good against our hand, because they don't have any major payoffs to take. It's kind of setup cards and answer cards. Very, very good against us, so we just take a Fatal Push. It's just starting to feel like one of those leagues, isn't it? But maybe we'll still get there. Island, Opal, Astrolabe, back to us. We draw a 3rd land, and that, if we had not drawn the 3rd land, I might have just Thoughtseize here, might have just gotten the 2nd Fatal Push out of the hand. But now that we are lining up a turn 3 of Ouphe into Thoughtseize after using Bob as push bait, that is pretty much the play to make, as far as I can tell. We are a little bit more all in on Ouphe, and obviously Bob is good too. We don't want to just throw him away for no reason, but I think that was justifiable. Now we find a Choke. It was very tempting to just jam Choke, but Collector Ouphe arguably slows them down as much or more than Choke right now, given their board, and I also want to clear the way for another removal spell or for permission. Instead, we clear a Thought Cast out of their hand, an affinity card with draw 2, which is also very good. So I feel pretty rewarded for that decision, and we get to lock out a couple of their plays with the Ouphe. And we want to fade things like Oko, we want to fade another Fatal Push. They drew Thopter Foundry, don't care about that right now. We draw Nurturing Peatland, sure, we'll choke you out, we'll smack you for 2. And now we're attacking them with multiple hate pieces, and it's kind of a top deck war. Opponent will just pass back to us. We draw Abrupt Decay. Not a very necessary card right now, so we'll crack Peatland in search of something more proactive, and we find it in the form of Goyf. Smack you again with our 2/2 Ouphe, play the Goyf, and pass. Back to the OP. They're Shocking in Watery Grave. That's a bit scary. It does show that we have, that they have found something, rather, that is a little bit scary, and sure enough, it's Urza. It's Urza himself. Urza into Thoughtcast, what a turn. So they just 4-for-1'd us, and now we have to kill the Urza, and we can't because we have a decay in hand rather than something else. But you know what? We can still at least decay that construct, giving us some decent attacks. Collector Ouphe, of course, going to get blocked freely by Urza, but that's just a bouncing off, and the Goyf has them on a 2-turn clock here. So opponent with the Astrolabe, and then the pass, they're holding up the Urza activation, but you'd think they'd probably main phase that if they didn't have anything else to do. So they're probably holding up something else good, but we draw Vraska, uncastable, also cannot answer Urza, so they're kind of drawing the wrong half of the deck here in the mid game. Our position's still very strong, but the best thing we can do is just make Hexy a 4/4 and turn them all sideways. So what does the opponent have? Well, they've got the Ice Fang. It's yet another 2-for-1, and it's a really good blocker here. They choose to block Hexy instead of Goyf, which, you can understand that. And Urza and Collector Ouphe once again meet indecisively on the field of combat. So opponent going off here with some good plays, Bauble into Goose. These things aren't spectacular, especially in the face of Ouphe, but Urza makes them good, because Urza turns all these otherwise dead artifacts into Mox Sapphires, and he will do that, and he will find another Gilded Goose. So again, not the most spectacular, but they're definitely live plays. Once again, we failed to find something that kills Urza, so we just gotta attack again. But at least it's something good, at least it's something proactive. The Urza Ouphe duel to the death continues, it's Urza the Lord High Artificer, one of the most powerful creatures in lore, dueling to a stalemate repeatedly with a gremlin living in a cave who collects shiny things. You love to see it. So we play the Bob, we pass. We gotta fade a real scary top deck. And this is dicey, guys. It's pretty dicey, but we've got 3 of their lands choked out. We've got all their artifacts shut off. So they kind of are dependent on Urza. Urza just finds a rainforest. It's not dead. It lets them activate him again. But hopefully we fade this one. And it is Sword of the Meek. So we have successfully faded the top decks. And we need to draw removal here to get lethal, and Bobby shows us a fatal push. We could get Revolt and push Urza, but we don't even need to. We just push the Goose. We've got lethal coming across. So, wow, that was an intense game. That was a fun game. Fun for us, oofing them and choking them while beating them down, but you see just how powerful Urza himself is. Even though so much of their deck was shut off, Urza still kept them in the game, not only a good blocker, but also just digging and able to manufacture a ton of mana despite us hosing their mana in 2 different ways. Fortunately, Urza did not find Oko or some other really good value card, but he still really kept them in the game for quite some time, and we kind of barely got over the line. You figure sooner or later they were doomed to bury us with Urza, but we did get over the line on the back of our powerful hate cards and the clock of Tarmogoyf. Quick sideboarding note here, my friends. We have brought the Veil of Summer back in and taken a Liliana of the Veil out. I kind of like that on the draw. Lily gets a lot worse on the draw. Veil arguably gets better on the draw because we are wanting to lower our curve and perhaps play a more reactive game in the early stages anyway. So that's why I did that. And we've got a no-lander. I think we've kind of taken a lot of mulligans here, and wouldn't you know it, we mulligan to another no-lander. I mean, when the luck is not with you, the luck is not with you. This is a pretty good 5 that we can manufacture from this. You could go a couple different ways, but I did decide to just bottom both 3 drops. We're just keeping 2 Bobs around. That way we're pretty much guaranteed to unmulligan ourselves, even if they can answer 1 Bob. Hopefully the other one will stick, right? That's the idea here. Opponent goes Citadel, Opal, pass. The opponent also mulliganed. I think they went to 6. We've drawn a third land. That's actually pretty good. It's just going to let us curve out. So Inquisition U, and we see a very powerful hand. At first glance, it's like, we can't beat this hand. We just can't beat it. We mulligan too deep, it's too strong. But if you actually look at it and look at their mana, they cannot cast anything. They're not even really close to casting Drown in the Loch and Thief of Crowns. Like, they would need to find another artifact to turn on Mox Opal and a colored land, and obviously they're 2 turns away from doing that. And the only thing, though, is if they find a color land next turn, then Metallic Rebuke is live. So even though Metallic Rebuke is kind of the weakest card in their hand, especially because we know about it, I still think it's the correct take. We have mulligan to 5, we've got to play for the higher upsides, we've got to fade the land drop for at least a turn, and we did. So, that is a beautiful thing. We have also drawn Tarmogoyf, a fine card, but we're going to jam Bob here, try to pull ahead. Okay, opponent hits the land drop, so we're not just going to get a free win here, but we do get to untap with Bob. That is lovely. We hit 2 lands off of Bob. Sure, we'll take it. You know, that's not bad. Could play another Bob or another Goyf here. I did decide to get the pressure down of Goyf. If they are making Oko next turn, it's a better way to pressure him, and obviously we want to fade them hitting the 3rd land or an artifact to turn on Opal. They did hit the 3rd land, and it is Oko time, making a food. So, back to us. Bob's flips continue to be painless, but at this point we wouldn't really mind the pain. We would kind of want more gas, honestly. Fatal Push, a fine card, but not a very proactive one. So what we could do here is play Castle Locthwain, fire up Hissing Quagmire, and attack Oko off the field. I don't like that as much, simply because they have another Oko in hand. I would rather, therefore, develop my board a little bit more. So we're going to attack Oko down to 1, make sure he's not doing anything too crazy next turn, and make sure that if they don't play another Oko, that we can cleanly answer him next turn. Doing this also allows us to be extraordinarily mana efficient by deploying Blooming Marsh, making our subsequent turns mana better, and also holding up Fatal Push this turn. So for all these reasons, I like that. But the opponent finds Urza. Don't they always just find Urza? They also tick up Oko, but hey, at least we can Fatal Push the construct. Now, under some circumstances, it might be better to untap and try to draw stuff to make Revolt for Urza, but look, we're drawing 3 cards per turn. I just want to be as mana efficient as possible. We've got a ton of ways in the deck to kill Urza, but we flip Vraska, we flip Nurturing Peatland, and we flip Plague Engineer, so we don't get to kill Urza, so this is super tilting, and it's super unlucky, frankly. That said, we've got a lot of good gas at our disposal. What do? Well, I think the obvious play here is to Vraska and Decay Oko, and I think that's totally fine. Then we get to play Blooming Marsh, we're mana efficient, all that good stuff. But then, we're just kind of attacking with Tarmogoyf. Urza is not only unchecked, but also holding off our Bobs. Not only this turn, but for all the turns until we can kill him. So I took an unorthodox line here, and I actually decided to say Plague Man, naming human is pretty sweet. It's going to shrink Urza, and it's going to allow all 3 of our creatures to attack. This way we get to get Oko off the field just as well as we would have by decaying him, and we also, of course, are attacking better into Urza in the future. Finally, Urza doesn't even get to kill Vraska on the crackback like he would have otherwise if we had said Decay. We would either be chumping with a Bob, or maybe trying to double block with 2 Bobs. Anyway, you understand what we've got going on here, why we took the unorthodox line. Opponent has a great turn, though. They play their backup Oko, which we knew was coming, but they also have Push for Goyf. You hate to see it. But look, we're drawing 3 cards per turn, but we just took 6 damage off of our Bobs. And we drew a Thoughtseize, so what do? It's been so painful. Do we play Vraska? Do we play Liliana? As you can see, I was a little bit indecisive. In the end, I said, you know what? We're Thoughtseizing. We know Drown in the Loch is in hand. We know that's a good card. They might have something even better. They don't. It's only a goose, but we get to take Drown. We're all the way down at 6. Now, guys, I'm breezing through this pretty quickly on a replay, but you can understand how complicated these decisions are, how complicated the board state was. We've already had 2 complex games, and it's early in a long 7-round challenge. And by the way, every single match comes down to the wire. Just so you know, there's lots of really tight gameplay that you're about to see, but we do play the Vraska, and we do decide to tick down here because we've just got to get this Oko off the field. Like, we are throwing caution to the winds here. We are attacking with Bobs. We are going to get the Oko down before they can start trading and all that stuff. And once again, the Plague Engineer making Urza's crackback, either pressuring our very low life total or pressuring Vraska non-existent. But we are at the total and complete mercy of Bobs here. They make a food, they attack, they put us to 3. So on average, Bob is doing about 1.2 damage per flip in most rock decks. So technically, we're slightly likely to live here, but it's obviously very, very dicey, and that's only for 1 turn. So obviously playing with fire here, but it's greatness at any cost time. That's what we're up to. Desperate times, desperate measures, am I right? Urza will activate, finding only Polluted Delta mercifully, but it's still just free value for them. They've played the Goose, and it's Bob time. First Bob is going to show us Assassin's Trophy, so we're at 1. Second Bob is going to show us Field of Ruin. So hope springs eternal, my friends. And despite that, I did punt here. This was not a good play, but again, you understand the complicated board state. This was force of habit more than anything. Like, I'm thinking about a million things, and then I look at my hand and I'm puzzling out the lines, and then I go on a little bit of an autopilot decision, which is usually a good one. Like, your life total's low, you've got a ton of lands, well, float a mana, then tick Vraska up to see a new card. Like, that's pretty good. We generate Revolt too, in case we need that. The problem is, even though that's good under most circumstances here, I should be cashing in a Bob. I should really be cashing in a Bob because they're a liability now, and we could really use the mana because we have so many cards, right? So that was a misplay. But we're going to use that floated mana to play Goyf. Hopefully it doesn't lose us this game, right? Then we're going to go ahead and trophy Urza. We would admittedly have had to sequence differently here if we were planning to cash in a Bob, and maybe that could hurt us in another way or two, but still that was almost certainly the right play. But what we're going to do here is attack with both Bobs. We're going to get the Oko guaranteed off the field this way. Hold back the Plague Man on defense, because that Elk token could kill us if the opponent draws a removal spell for our Goyf. Then, unfortunately, we are priced into Liliana Edict ourselves to get rid of one of our Bobs. Again, I should have done this more cleanly by cashing it in with Vraska. Then we would have another land on the field, and maybe we would have edicted the opponent with Lily, or maybe we would have done something else altogether. I don't know. So, a misplay from yours truly. And we just hope the opponent doesn't top deck something awesome. So obviously they top deck Urza. It's super intense. They're holding up the activation here. We're flipping off of Bob. Bob flips Thoughtseize, so we're not dead. That's the big thing. We're not dead, but it's a dead card. So now I do like cashing in here with Vraska. I think we can, now that we've drawn Collective Brutality, afford to keep our Bob around, and kind of have to because they've got a wide board now and we need to find something good. But look at that, guys. We find Fatal Push. That's the perfect find. It's a nice mana-efficient way to kill this Urza. In response, opponent will float. And then it's Collective Brutality time. We're going to gain some life, get our life total back up. We're going to kill that Gilded Goose. And we're going to drain the opponent. They're going to make a food token in response. And then there's a few different things we could do. We could have actually pitched Peatland, but I did decide that Goyf is just kind of our best play here, because if we pitch Plague Engineer, we are a little bit softer to the combo, but the combo is the least of our worries right now. So this is how we sequence. We just sit back. We've just got to not die this upcoming turn, and then maybe we can start cashing in our Bob with Vraska. We've got a light at the end of the tunnel. We've got to fade a good top deck here, and we've got to fade a bad flip off of Bob. Opponent will main phase a Coatl. That's a pretty good draw for them. And they find Assassin's Trophy. So, a couple of great cards on the top of the opponent's deck. No getting it twisted. But a couple things happened during that sequencing. Number one, the construct is a little smaller. Number two, the Goyf is a little bit bigger. So all of a sudden, our Goyfs have the upper hand on the board. And that's actually very important. It means they don't have good attacks here. Their last card is Mox Opal. And we will cash in the Peatland here. The construct is back to a 5/5 after all is said and done, and we just don't want to flip Questing Beast with Bob, because that's going to kill us. Bob flips a swamp. Attaboy, Bob, getting us out of the woods here. So Peatland will crack it. We are flooding a little bit, but Collector Ouphe is a pretty good find. So we're just controlling the board. We cash in Lily. Lily will take care of an Elk. And then it's time to bash in with our Goyfs. They actually, this is pretty interesting, they don't have Death Touch here. They only have 2 snow-covered lands here, so that is not a trade. That is a chump block, and that's very unusual at this stage of the game, but we'll certainly take it. We're playing very cautious with our life total here. I think we have to, and Collector Ouphe is the play. Opponent's going to gain the life, but back to them. They're in top deck mode. What do they have? Well, they must have had a brick because they just scoop. Now, granted, they should have made us hit the trigger off of Bob to make sure QB didn't kill us, but I think I looked at my next card and it was something painless or relatively painless. So, greatness at any cost, guys. How epic was that? We're playing with fire. It should not have been quite as close as it was, again, because I should have cashed in a Bob with Vraska rather than a land. However, we still managed to keep our own Bobs under control. We went right to the brink of disaster, and then we staved off disaster, and we found greatness instead. You gotta love that. That was a classic Rock victory in every way. Every piece of the deck pulling its weight, and we scrape by in a close one to redeem ourselves to a 500 record in the first ever Modern Challenge played by the Grim Flayer. It is round 3, my friends, and we've got an awkward hand in a few ways. You know, it doesn't have double black unless we manufacture it with field. We've got a lot of dirtily threats and not enough interaction. But, you know, it is a keep in a blind game 1. It's pretty useful, perhaps, against some kind of an attrition deck, you imagine. But we're not against an attrition deck. We're against Amulet Titan that has turn 1 Tribe Scout, so it immediately is looking really, really rough for us. But we do draw Fatal Push. That's arguably our best possible draw. We get to go Swamp and push the Scout, slow them down here. That was perfect. But now our mana is even worse because we didn't even get to get Treetop Village down on turn 1. So that's the downside, right? But the opponent will find Castle Garenbrig off of a Stirrings. They're going to play a bounce land, and then it's back to us. So we kind of want to draw, like, for example, the card we drew, Blooming Marsh. Blooming Marsh, a great draw. We get to be proactive here, playing out the Skoos. We get to guarantee Liliana on curve next turn if that's the play we want. So our draws have been kind, but our hand is still looking a little bit soft to an Amulet Titan deck. Opponent will Once Upon a Time into a Titan, and then they will Stirrings into an Amulet of Vigor. So it's all a little bit scary here. They're getting this the combo pieces well and truly online. We draw Maelstrom Pulse. This is a good draw in the matchup in general. I don't know how it's going to line up, but it's certainly Liliana time, and I think Skoos is the worst card in our hand. If we do just want to make our board as good as possible next turn, it would be Tracker and Effect into Treetop. So anyway, it's back to OP. OP goes Amulet of Vigor into a second Amulet of Vigor into Castle Garenbrig. So they are going to have lethal next turn with that Titan if they have another land in hand, and we're sure they do. But if only there was a card that let us kill all copies of permanents with the same name for the price of one low card. If only we had one in our hand. Oh wait, we do. So it's Liliana. We'll tick up without giving them any info. And look, we've got a couple lands out of their hand, including a bounce land, but with these tick ups, that's pretty good. And we 2-for-1 the amulets with Pulse. That is even better. We play Treetop Village, we pass to OP. Suddenly they look a lot less scary, but they still got Titan in hand, and they find a Zusa. So that's pretty terrifying too, but to be fair, they have pitched lands, and so they only have 5 mana. They need to draw the lands to make any of this good. We draw Inquisition of Kozilek, and that's a pretty free pitch to Liliana. We get the Titan out of their hand. Now they are well and truly on the back foot. We've got Trophy and Field in the back pocket. So my thinking here was we could like Field and Trophy really aggressively, but I want to protect the Liliana at all costs, because look, we've got the Liliana ultimate waiting in the wings next turn too, so that's why we sit back with Skoos. I'm going to decide to draw step, activate Field of Ruin, and the opponent does just scoop to that. Whatever they drew is not going to save them, but we would have maybe played it really cautious with Trophy and then ulted them next turn. Now, granted, our clock is still pretty slow, but they just don't feel they can come back from this, and who can blame them? That was a bit of a blowout with the Pulse, and having the main access to main deck land destruction with Field and Trophy, pretty sweet sometimes. So there we go. Despite the lack of a super proactive clock and a super proactive progression, the power of Liliana and the power of our other disruption really showing its worth here. So it feels great. Great, I tell you, to beat Amulet Titan in Game 1, but we still might be facing an uphill battle post-side. Alright guys, so we are against stock Amulet Titan, and the big difference between this and how I sideboarded in Game 1 is I'm not quite as interested in all three Plague Engineers, and I'm definitely not as interested in Fatal Push or in Vraska because they're not showing me, Elvish Reclaimer, basically, so we do a more stock sideboarded plan, and it looks something like this. Obviously bringing in Fulminators and Ashioks. And we see a handful of absolutely amazing cards and no land to cast them. So many. Oops, I didn't mean to skip to next turn. I should have just skipped forward. So many mulligans this league. Anyway, we go to 6. I didn't remember what we bottomed, but it was something extraneous, and we have a pretty good 6, right? The only thing it doesn't do is cast our colored spells, so we've got Thoughtseize, Push, and Scooze live, and then we need to draw a third land to turn on trophies and to turn on field. Opponents got Oko and double Ancient Stirrings, plus a bounce land, plus Field of the Dead. They've got turn 1 Amulet, so as much as leaving the Stirrings kind of sucks and lets them execute their core plan, our hand also can't really beat Oko that well. The best we can hope for is to draw a colored land and then trophy him, thereby ramping them. I don't think that's good. I think we're supposed to take Oko and hope their Stirrings hits are a little bit mediocre while we curve out. So they have found Castle Garenbrig, and we have found another uncastable card. I'm just going to hit play here. Scooze is the obvious play here. But opponent going off with Once Upon a Time for a bounce land, then they find Azusa, so their finds have been incredible. Then they Stirrings into a Talaria West. Then it's Amulet of Vigor, ready to go off, and we just draw another bad card. We're doing literally nothing. We know there's lands in their hand, Inquisition's gonna whiff. We can't push Azusa because we don't have Revolt. There's not even anything in the yard for Scooze to eat, so we're literally 5 cards in hand, none of them doing anything. Our board is an actual Grizzly Bear, and the opponent is gonna transmute for a Pact for a Titan with Azusa and Amulet on the field, plus a little extra mana to play with, is going to be lethal. I'll just show you it, I suppose. It is going to be Slayer's Stronghold, giving it haste, and then once it gets haste, it's going to get an attack trigger, tutoring up another red land plus the double strike land, and that's going to deal us lethal. It's going to alpha strike us. So as much as we kind of smoked him game 1 with our cards lining up unusually well in a few different ways, we just rolled over and died for them here in game 2. You never like to do that, but hey, if we're going to do it, it might as well be on the draw, right? Might as well be on the draw having mulligans. So we're going to go to game 3 hoping for a much better keep on the play. Okay, my friends, we got our wish. We got what we wished for. It's a 3-lander with great mana, and it's Thoughtseize into a 2-drop into Ashiok. Now, we've been seeing a disturbing amount of turn 2 Scooze in these big mana matchups. Again, we side out 2 copies of them. We keep seeing the third. Obviously, much rather have Goyf or Bob there, right? Against these big mana decks, but whatever. We'll take it. It's a good hand. Opponent did also mulligan to 6, which is very helpful, and they have a great 6. It's got the inevitable top end of Double Titan. They've got the Amulet to speed things up, and they've got 3 good lands. But we have Ashiok shutting off the Titan ETBs. So with Ashiok around, unless they can answer our Planeswalker, it is kind of a 6-mana 6/6 and nothing more. So we draw a trophy, another fine draw, another fine card in the matchup, but it is definitely Grizzly Bear time. Opponent is finding more land drops with their natural draw plus their Stirrings, and we find another trophy. So it's not really, we would almost not want to see that at this point. We want to see the 4th land for QB. We want to otherwise be doing more proactive things, but this is still fine, all things considered. Opponent has found yet another land. It is Colony Garden, and it's a plant token. And you know what? I'm pretty happy to Stone Rain the Colony Garden. It's better to Stone Rain a dual land most of the time, but look, we slow them down still this way. Something proactive to do, and the plant tokens can really... our clock is already slow enough. We don't need them repeatedly bouncing the Colony Garden to make more plants to make it even slower. So we've drawn a lot of non-proactive stuff, but now we draw Field of Ruin. What a fantastic draw. Great card in the matchup, also letting us cast QB. That's what we want. Ashiok just chilling in the backfield, no need to activate. Just want to keep its loyalty as high as possible. We smack him for 6. Opponent has found Azusa. That's a pretty good find. It's going to let them do all kinds of good stuff. They've also found Field of the Dead, so they've been just finding a lot of lands, basically some good utility out of the land base, and the Azusa. So they're all set up for a Titan next turn. Not much we can do about it, except maybe cast this Fulminator Mage that we drew. So, interesting call. Do we take the more mana-efficient line of Field into Trophy and just go all in? Or do we just simply Stone Rain them with Fulminator? Either way, we're going to attack first. We do draw a chump block from the plant on our 2-2. And then I did opt for Fulminator. And hitting Gruul Turf might be a little bit better in some ways, but with Azusa, maybe they can manufacture the mana they need anyway. So I just decided to take care of Field of the Dead before anything too crazy happened with that. Probably doesn't matter much either way, right? But they have the mana that they need, sure enough. And they have the Titan, but look, Titan's just a 6/6, man. Ashiok says no lands for you, and we draw Dark Confidant. Certainly would have been better basically any turn before this, but it's a thing. But it's not the thing we're doing right now. We're going to field a Celestia Sanctuary, choosing to tag the white land because I'm having flashbacks to round 1 where they Path Exiled me. We don't need QB Pathed, that is for certain. So let's go ahead and trophy away big old Titan here. And then we have a nice attack that the opponent is going to have to chump block yet again with, and they're still going all the way down to 2. And they still have to deal with Ashiok in order to make that Titan good. Now, Titan's a roadblock, but not only do we have lethal on board, we got another trophy in hand. So, opponent figuring out how best to sequence here. It is just going to be a Titan. They show us the Titan, and then they cast a Summoner's Pact just to show us how badly they were locked out by Ashiok. And that's going to do it. So Ashiok literally just coming down and chilling. You know, no activations, no anything else, just sitting there as a static hate piece, shutting off the Primeval Titan Search, shutting off Summoner's Pact. That is exactly what Ashiok is there to do. We had some good disruption. We had Thoughtseize, we had Fields, we had Fulminators, and we had trophies. We had all the disruption we needed, and we had QB for a nice clock that cannot even be chump blocked by their plants and their Azusas. So that was kind of, it wasn't a perfect curve out by any means. We definitely lacked proactivity for a little while. We definitely lacked a premier 2-drop threat. Skooz was a literal grizzly bear all game, but it was good enough. It was a strong curve out, and it feels so good, guys. It feels so good to beat Amulet Titan. We did so here. You love to see that, and we are 2-1 in the Modern Challenge going into round 4. Hope you're enjoying this one here, guys. I'm having fun, and here we are for round 4 with a totally fine hand in a blind game 1, but it's a little rough, and just in terms of how slow it is on the draw, but it's not one we throw back, right? We kind of hope the opponent is not on something really fast, but we notice they're called Just Burn 420, and then we see turn 1 Swifty off of a wooded foothills into mountains, so burn pretty much confirmed. And we draw another slow card, the 3rd Liliana the Veil. Really? Really? Not where we want to be. Not where we want to be at all. We just gotta kind of hope they don't have that explosive of a start, but they sure do. They've got Swifty number 2 into Lava Spike, just kind of taking it to us here. We take 7 damage all day that turn. Tarmogoyf is a pretty good draw. There's a very limited number of cards that are sorceries and can also target the board in the burn deck. There aren't many, and Tarmogoyf will survive an instant pointed at it, so that's definitely a better play than Skooz here. But the opponent makes the 3rd land drop, and they have Rift Bolt hardcast for the Tarmogoyf, so if nothing else, maybe we made their turn more awkward this way, but it's still very, very bad. And we draw another totally dead card in the form of Thoughtseize, so not drawing what we need to compete. We do get a nice 2-for-1 with Maelstrom Pulse, and we kind of hope they're just totally out of gas right now. That's our only real hope. And that we can maybe draw an untapped green land, a painless one, to make Scooze good. Instead, we draw an uncastable QB. You hate to see that. So I decided that our only real hope of winning this game is that they are basically out of gas. So therefore, instead of playing an Ooze out and like trading it with a burn spell and then we don't really have anything else left in our hand, I decided to go for the higher upside of them being out of gas. We start getting something out of their hand here with Liliana, even if it's just more lands or more reactive cards like Searing Blaze, and then again hope to draw that untapped painless green land next turn to let Scooze live and take over the game. That's the idea anyway. We get Fiery Islet out of their hand, which is fine, and then they'll Helix us, and then they'll pass. So with only one card left in hand, though they play a land then pass. With only one card left in hand, you gotta imagine they have something to do here, but there's still no reason not to take up. We've got extra lilies in hand, and they do indeed have a Helix, so they're very far out of our reach now. We lose an extra lily, and, you know, because this is a Nurturing Peatland, there is almost an argument to just play QB and race and hope they draw nothing for the rest of the game. But instead, we will just play Scooze, gain 1 life, hope to fade their top deck. Obviously, if this was any other non-pain untapped green land, it'd be way better. To be fair, I don't think there are too many of those. Marsh enters tapped. Utility manlands enter tapped. Fetch is painful. Tomb is painful, and they just draw a Helix, so they just put us out of our misery there. 24-0. Not a very close one, but hey, they had the curve out, we had the slow stuff, they were on the play, and we also, our top decks did not comply at all. So, there you go. I think Burn is a great matchup for BG the Rock, but I also know that we are at high risk of dropping a lot of game ones like this. We are still very capable, though, of winning both post-side games. It's just so much nicer to win game 1, because then you're so favored to win at least one of the 2 post-side, right? But now we gotta do it the hard way. We gotta win both post-side. Let's see what we can do. Alright, my friends, you know how to sideboard against Burn, right? Like, we bring in Collective Brutality and Kitchen Finks are by far our 2 best cards. Vraska's also pretty decent with the ability to gain life, specifically. Also controlling the board with her as live, so those 3 for sure come in. And then we have 3 copies of Fulminator Mage and 2 copies of Plague Engineer that are both kind of in the category of better than bad things. So I think, like, in a vacuum, this Tireless Tracker is roughly as good as those cards in the matchup, but Plagueman and Fulminator both get better in multiples, so I decided to bring in all 3 Plaguemen, 2 from the side plus the 1 main deck, and all 3 Fulminators. The Tracker makes way for that, and of course all of the painful stuff of triple Thoughtseize, quadruple Bob loses out, and we've got a good keeper. It's not a perfect hand, but it's a Collective Brutality Tarmogoyf hand, and it functions, so it is a keep. And opponent is keeping 7 as well, but they're just fetching. Oh, sorry, no. I gotta remember Rift Bolt. Rift Bolt was the play. They suspend that. And then it is back to us, and we've drawn the 3rd land, which is pretty useful. So it's definitely Brutality time. Of course, ideally, you want to escalate for all 3 modes and get a kill off of it, but pitching Trophy here is fine, and it's also fine to just do the 2-mode Brutality to take their key piece and also to play around Skullcrack and similar effects. But the opponent has just kept an absolute gas hand. Like, literally, when you count this Rift Bolt, they played turn 1 at 6 burn spells and 2 lands. Couldn't really be better against us. So we just take Lightning Bolt because it's the most flexible one. And they even have Sunbait Canyon for built-in flood insurance should their hand get any less perfect in the mid-game. So, yeah, definitely a little bit scary. But they draw Inspiring Vantage. They're going to skewer us after Rift Bolt comes off suspend. Then they will suspend another Rift Bolt. So, back over to us. We know the entire contents of their hand. And we draw Field of Ruin. I did consider concealing that, but frankly, they're probably going to empty out their hand one way or another, regardless of field, and tap out, but maybe not. Who knows? Either way, Goyf is the play there, even though it's a little less mana efficient. We got to put the big body down, we got to clock them. So they're going to bolt us, they're going to skewer us, and then they're going to spike us. We knew about all this, so they've got one unknown in hand, and then they're going to say, go ahead. So back to us, we draw Blooming Marsh, pretty bad draw. Pretty bad draw, you have to say. We gotta find life gain. We've gotta find either that or another good threat to put down. We don't have either. So we could play a Grey Ogre, or we could Field of Ruin. I don't think we should Stone Rain with Fulminator, though. I think saving that as a Grey Ogre for the mid-game is better. So if we're going to take care of their land, we should do it with Field, and that's what I opted to do. I thought that was better than Grey Ogre. Just stopping them from drawing more gas, basically. Worse against a creature, but they don't find a creature, they find a Rift Bolt. So Goyf will attack. We draw yet another clunky 3-drop, but this clunky 3-drop, I guess, is a little bit better than our other clunky 3-drops. But yeah, certainly not drawing the things that we really want to see. I do go with Plague Man, and I do name Human, because I think Swifty is a little scarier than Goblin Guide right now. Plus, it's just possible they're on Grim Lavamancer, right? So I think Human is a little bit better when it's mostly a blind name. They're going to bolt us, so we are dead to Boros Charm, but they don't have it. They play out a land. Last card in hand could be anything, except Boros Charm. We know it's not that, right? But once again, we draw kind of a bad card. Fatal Push is a fine card in the matchup, but certainly right now, it's not what we want to see. So all we can do is smash him, play out our Grey Ogre, and pass. We have to fade Double Burn or just a single Boros Charm. We can beat most other things, including a removal spell like Path to Exile, and they didn't have it. So you got to imagine, with 2 cards left in hand, they probably had a Lightning Bolt or another type of 3 damage spell. That just goes to show you, my friends, the power of the painless mana base in the rock. Even though I did say how I think, for example, Jund, or maybe even in like an Oko rock deck, probably better positioned overall, there are still all kinds of incentives to play 2 colors. We've seen Field of Ruin be huge this league in basically every match, and we have seen also Field of Ruin pretty relevant here against Burn, but more importantly, we had a totally painless curve out with our mana. The opponent probably had us at a virtual 1, so if we had had to fetch or shock even once, we'd likely be dumped out with an 0-2 out of this round here, round 4. But as it is, we scrape by despite a pretty suboptimal progression after our Brutality into Goyf start. It petered out pretty hard from there, but we had enough natural life gain, or lack of life loss, more accurately, that we were able to squeeze by. But we were on the play, guys. That was the easy one. So let's check out Game 3, see what goes on. On the draw here against our friend who just wants to burn 420, and we've got a keeper, We've got some good early interaction for a change. We do have a Finks. Our mana's not ideal, but it's a keep. And on the draw, we should really draw the 3rd land. So opponent, unfortunately, keeping 7, starting us off with a Swifty, and this is a super interesting decision. We draw another 3-drop. Story of our league, really, getting a little bit mana screwed and having a clunky hand. But anyway, forget that for a minute. Let's figure out Inquisition versus Push. Tempo is important in this matchup. No question about it. Inquisition is always a tempo negative play because we are trading 1 for 1, but we're the ones spending mana to do so. When they're on the play, that can be very risky. And Fatal Push can actually be very tempo positive. It's at least tempo even. We trade our 1-drop with their 1-drop. We both spent 1 mana to do it, but we also maybe, price them into sequencing a different way to make their prowess better, and then we kill it anyway. So in a lot of ways, Fatal Push is better, but you have to also game out what they could have, and relative to the contents of your own hand. I don't really think on the draw I can beat an Eidolon of the Great Revel hand. So for that reason, specifically out of fear of Eidolon, I do decide to Inquisition instead of Push, and that's exactly what they got. But again, could they stop keeping these perfect 5-spell, 2-land, perfectly balanced hands against us? That would be great if they could ever not have that. But anyway, we do at least get rid of Eidolon, but geez, they've got a scary hand. Sunbait Canyon for the flood insurance, and all kinds of power and gas. But, interestingly, the opponent goes straight to attacks. I really expect to just land into Boros Charm and to attack, but they don't. So the thing that this makes me think is that maybe they have drawn a Skullcrack and they want to play around Collective Brutality. That's the only thing I can think of. That or some other reactive card, or maybe just a misplay too, you never know. Either way, end step they will Boros Charm us, but we did save a life because they didn't do it on their turn. And we don't have the brutality anyway, my friend, don't worry. All we've got is another 3-drop for turn, so it is just Clunk City over here. At least we've got the push, right? So, opponent making a land drop, opponent helixing us, we go past blocks, so they start dumping out spells on our terms, kind of, and that's good enough for me to push after we see the helix. So they've got a Rift Bolt and 1 Unknown in hand, and they are going to go ahead and suspend that Rift Bolt. So back to us, we're just praying to finally draw the 3rd land, and we do, and it's a tapped one. You gotta be kidding me. So we just basically time walk ourselves this turn due to the clunk of our hand and our mana. It sucks. At least it was painless, but it really sucks. So opponent has Lava Spike still in hand, and the Rift Bolt comes off suspend, and then they drew another Rift Bolt for turn, so they just don't stop drawing bolts, basically. It's all a little bit rough. We draw Peatland a little bit too late for that to be good. Don't know if we'll ever be able to tap it, don't know if we'll ever be able to crack it, but hey, we get to finally play our Finks, and we hope the opponent finally runs out of gas. So they're going to put us to 4 here, we're going to be dead to a Boros Charm off the top, otherwise the game's going to go on. So they don't have Charm, the game goes on. And we have Scavenging Ooze. That's a pretty good draw, not gonna lie. Once again, just like in game 1 of this round, Peatland making Skoos notably worse. Total non-bow, but we'll play the Skoos anyway. It's still our best play, and we'll see what the opponent's got here. So on the end step, they're going to crack Sunbaked Canyon. In response to this, I'm going to choose to gain a life. If we really wanted the Skoos to survive, we could gain another life, but this is the last source of life gain. Excuse me, we could eat another Eidolon, but we would be neutral on life because it is Peatland. And that's the very last source of life gain we have available to Skoos, so I'm not going to do that. We're just gonna leave it up and hope they don't kill us. They bolt us on the end step, they've got 2 cards in hand, we're dead to any bolt, but they don't have one. Minor miracle, they don't have one. So, really interesting spot here. I think the responsible thing to do is to just try to gain a life first, see if this draws anything out. And it doesn't, so we're back up to 3. Now, another really interesting line here is to maybe attack first. It'd be a big attack, we'd be attacking for 7. And then we Liliana Edict ourselves. Then we of course, sacrifice Kitchen Finks. That's going to gain us 2 life, and it's also going to bring it back as a 2/1 blocker, untapped, that can block like a Goblin Guide off the top. However, I did decide, because it would cost us a life to do so, I felt that was a little bit sketchy. Might not really change things either way. Decided to go for the higher upside play of Peatland here. Didn't end up finding anything good off of it, so maybe that was a better line, the Liliana Edict. I don't know. Either way, it does price us into leaving back the Finks as a blocker, and we just play a Blooming Marsh and we just pass. So we're dead to any bolt, but once again, guys, they don't have one. We are dodging. We are dodging the bolts. You love to see that, and we have Vraska for turn, Fulminator Mage as well. You could gain 1 life in a couple different ways. We could play Vraska, we could sack a land and gain a life. Or we could play Fulminator, take away one of their lands and gain a life. So I would rather Stone Rain them than Stone Rain ourselves, and therefore that's what we do. And of course, either way we gain a life. And we also grow the Ooze this way, so this is better. Again, though, you do wonder, maybe the Liliana Edict line is looking a little bit more attractive now, but we are kind of committing to this line that we started last turn. I think committing to it this turn again is fine. We are still dead to double burn either way. We're dead to Boros Charm this way and not to Boros Charm the other way, so that would have been the main reason not to do it. But in any case, you can kind of see at least the usefulness of that line to keep in your mind for the future. And And it's definitely a super interesting game coming straight down to the wire. Having said that, the fact that we did take the line the previous turn makes Fulminatoring a little bit more attractive now, because of course we also are potentially stopping them from double spelling this turn in some way. Whether it be hard-casted Rift Bolts or whatever, but the opponent will put us to 1 and then play a Goblin Guide with 1 card left in hand. Maybe they've just got creatures in hand, maybe they've just got like a Searing Blaze or something, I don't know. But either way, we've got lethal. We got the Fatal Push, and that is going to clear the way for lethal, and we could have done it a few different ways this turn, but push is the most efficient. We get there once again at 1 life. So again, maybe we would have had a slightly higher buffer if we had taken the attack with Finks, edict with Liliana. We might have also had a quicker clock that way, so maybe that was optimal, but either way, we did get there, and once again, the totally painless mana of green-black. Well, not totally painless, because Peatland was cramping our style for a minute, but we never actually took pain off of it, I don't think. And anyway, that was just another advertisement for how the mana base can really save your bacon when you're on a BGX deck against Burn. Super close game, doesn't get any closer than that. We were at 1 life both games that we won. Doesn't get any closer than that, and we had a 3-game series that we come out on top. So, the league started off a little bit rough, the challenge started off a bit rough, but we are cruising, we're in high gear, we are 3-1 going into round 5. We're on the draw, my friends, and this is a pretty unkeepable one. You know, it's just got too many high curve cards to justify the risk. It does some stuff. Thoughtseize and Fatal Push both castable off of Swamp, and we're on the draw. We're kind of likely to hit the second land, but in a blind. You know, if these were low curve cards, I might keep it, really. But we're going to send it back, and this is a pretty awful one, too, you know. It just... But you guys know me, I do not like to go to 5 in a blind game 1, because number 1, I don't know what I'm mulling toward, don't know what I'm against, and number 2, I don't frankly feel that the Rock usually has the juice to beat most decks game 1 if we mull to 5, because we get so much better after sideboarding relative to how we are game 1, so I do just keep it. You know, this hand is fine if we draw a third land, specifically a green one, but it does exactly nothing until we do. I'm just going to hit play here, and maybe that gives away how this game 1 is going to go. We draw another uncastable card. It's Plague Man. Opponent on colorless tribal over there, Tech Edge, Ghost Quarter, Double Ether Vial, and we are on uncastable tribal. We just draw uncastable cards, haven't hit the third land, so we're just doing jack shit, basically. Sorry for the language. Try to keep it clean on the channel, but that's the most apt terminology here. So against an Ether Vial deck, we're not going to fire off Brutality without using it to control the board in some way. So we just pass again. Opponent goes Blade Splicer into Golem. Hey, we finally find our third land. So we kind of priced into getting double black and green there, I think, so we shock. And it's Plague Engineer naming Human. They're going to blink their Blade Splicer in response with Charming Prince, which is going to still have the Blade Splicer die to state-based effects when it comes back, but it will first make another Golem token. And right now we can't really handle the Golem tokens, so good turn from the opponent. And you've got to imagine that they've got all kinds of other stuff going their way, most notably this clock. We're not going to trade off just yet. We'll see what else they've got. Leonin Arbiter is going to Wasteland us, and that's terrible. So Arbiter plus Ghost Quarter equals Wasteland, so we're back on no green sources, so nothing else we can do on our turn besides go for an escalated Brutality to try to extend the game, and the opponent blows us out super hard with a Restoration Angel. That's just it. That's just enough for me to scoop. We are very, very, very dead, and we didn't really put up any kind of a fight. So this is mono-white Death and Taxes. You can tell by the nature of the lands. I'm not even suspicious for Eldrazi and Taxes because, again, they're on Ghost Quarter and Tech Edge instead of the Eldrazi lands or like a white Pain land to help cast Eldrazi and fix their mana. So it seems like classic mono-white D&T. Think it's a pretty great matchup for us, not gonna lie, but we did just roll over and die game 1. So kind of like with Burn, we're happy to see the matchup, but we really wish we won game 1. Let's see what we can do post-side. Okay, my friends, so I sideboard relatively conservatively against most Taxes matchups, 4 in, 4 out. We bring in both copies of Plague Man because he's just the bomb. Very good. They got a lot of X1s over there. We bring in Vraska Golgari Queen. Their entire deck besides Restoration Angel should be decayable, and she's good recursive value. The matchups do get very grindy. And we also brought in Collective Brutality, because it will kill most things in their deck. It's just kind of a medium kill spell, good enough to come in. In terms of what comes out, speaking of them getting grindy, we do shave away on some discard effects. Kind of half in, half out with the discard. We're also hedged with what we kept in. We keep in one Thoughtseize, 2 Inquisition. Balancing act between early disruption versus bad top decks, and within the discard between preserving our life total and being able to nab resto. So hedge city with the discard, and we cut a Scooze because they could be on some grave hate, and also even if they're not, they're attacking our mana very aggressively, makes Scooze a lot clunkier, and Scooze can't even snowball the game uncontested necessarily because they can always blink it and reset it to a Grizzly Bear with Flicker Wisp or something like that. So anyway, that's how we side. I'm pretty confident with that siding. And our hand's good. Our hand's good. We need kind of another black land on curve, but it's a great hand. Especially on the play. It would admittedly be a lot worse on the draw. Our wish is granted, we get the second land, and I am just going to fetch and shock now. We're fetching because we want to play around Leonin Arbiter, shutting off our fetches, and we're shocking because they're a Path to Exile deck. We already got 2 basics in our opener. We don't want to run out of those. So hopefully we can afford 1 shock. And the opponent indeed does have that Arbiter. So back to us. We're untapping with Bob, which is always great. We're taking 3 to see a Plague Man. Don't get me wrong, we love the Plague Man, but kind of a rough hit. But hey, Liliana on curve, edicting you, clearing the way. It's pretty great stuff. So back to the OP. And what will they come up with here? Mirren Crusader. So this card is the absolute bane of our existence on Green-Black Rock. Double strike, pro-black, pro-green. You don't see it very often because it's a pretty narrow card, and because Rock especially is not that common right now. It does just die to Lightning Bolt if you're against Jund, for example. However, it's very good against us, and we were maybe a little bit too cavalier about the Fetch Shock line because we take another 3 off of Plague Engineer, so we've done 9 damage to ourselves by turn 4. Pretty horrendous, and we're staring down the most powerful hate bear that they have. So we're going to tick Liliana up, at least we have extraneous lands to pitch. Apparently they do as well. So back over to us, and Plague Engineer is the play, and here is why. So number 1, it is going to shrink Mirren Crusader, which is going to slow down its clock. Maybe it's pressed into attacking Liliana either way, but we definitely like shrinking it. And number 2, if this Plague Man sticks, then the second Plague Man following him up is actually one of our only other ways besides an Edict to beat Mirren Crusader. On top of that, naming human against them in general is just pretty good. So, opponent is passing. Note, this is kind of the equivalent of, the green player that plays a lot of creatures suspiciously making the 4th land drop and saying go, pretty clearly representing Coco. Here I think they're pretty clearly representing Restoration Angel, but you know what? Restoration Angel doesn't help against double Plague Man, so Bob flips another Bob, I believe that was, or maybe it flipped Nurturing Peatland, actually. Little less pain this time around. Anyway, we're going to clear the way first with Inquisition, and sure enough, we see Restoration Angel is there. We also see Leonin Arbiter. So my first instinct was actually to take Arbiter, because a second Plague Man is going to shut off the other Crusader, leave it stranded in hand. But Crusader is just so unbeatable that I think it's the right take anyway. It's a card we can't really beat. If they draw like a Path for 1 Plague Engineer, we might be in trouble against the remaining Crusader. So that's why we take that line, but in any case, right now we get to have a lot of fun. Plague Man hosing your Crusader. Now, the final reason we sequence this way is because we do really need to race. So we're already down to 10, the opponent's about to flash in an evasive 3-4, and we're taking Bob hits every turn. So allowing taking care of the other Mirren Crusader with Inquisition means that even if they want to trade Resto for Plague Man, that's still kind of fine with us. It might even have been preferable, frankly. Whereas if we hadn't taken the other one out, then they would make that trade, then the other Crusader would come down. So you understand the lines here. We're still in some trouble just purely due to the unnaturally high life loss we've taken from our lone Dark Confidant, but we're still in it. Opponent will play out that Arbiter, they'll play out that Tech Edge, we don't know the unknown in their hand, and they're about to start going to work on our land base. Tech Edge takes care of Treetop Village, GQ becomes a wasteland hitting our tomb. It's all a little bit rough, but thankfully we are pretty flush with lands, we're still operational, and we have drawn Fatal Push. Fatal Push, a good draw, so we're going to crack Peatland to get Revolt, and then we're not going to mess around. We're just going to push Resto main phase. Certainly correct there. And we still have to race. So I think attacking this way is the best because, if they have a removal spell, they have a removal spell. We can't really play around that. Leaving back Bob makes their attacks worse. We're very happy to trade or even chump block against something unexpected maybe over the next couple turns. But if we're attacking this way, we're also being proactive. Also engineering a trade that way, pretty much fine with me. I'm sure pretty much fine with the opponent as well, right? So they're going to go Ether Vial. So these are still in post side, good to know. If they'd be out anytime, it would probably be on the draw, and they leave them in, so good to know about that. Bob flips a Bob. The pain continues. The bad cards kind of continue. And notably, because of the damage they've done to our land base, we cannot even play Lilian Edict our own Bob this turn. So once more, we find ourselves at the mercy of the darkest of confidants. Opponent's last card was a Dismember. Dismembering Plagueman? Sure, that's kind of fine with me. We still are doing some damage that way. Doesn't bother me any, especially because we get to follow it up with a big fat Tarmogoyf. So we gotta fade Bob flipping something that kills us, which is QB or Vraska, and we've gotta fade a good top deck from the opponent here. If we do, we actually have lethal on field, even though it might not be the most obvious. So Tech Edge is gonna hit our Marsh, and Bob is gonna flip something painless, attaboy Bobby, and now it's lethal time because we've got Maelstrom Pulse to hit Ether Vial. Not usually a play that you would make this stage of the game, but hey, that's going to grow the Goyf to Xaxes. 6/7 plus 2/1 equals 8 damage to the face. And they kind of needed a Path to Exile off the top to live, and they didn't have it. So, I think that line was good even if they did have a path, simply because we need to end the game as quickly as possible. We need to make them have it. And then, unless Bob kills us next turn, we can at least attack for another 2, edict him with Liliana, try to stabilize back in the game from there. But definitely was correct to go all in there before they had another chance to draw a path, before our Bob killed us, whatever, and it paid off. So little bit of a spicy line at the end there. Just, I guess it's not that spicy. You're literally just killing an artifact so the Goyf grows. But it's a rare thing to see at that stage of the game in this matchup. But however we get there, right? Greatness at any cost and victory at any cost. So we had another dicey run. We haven't really had the deck just giving us smooth sailing at all in this league, but we did scrape our way over the line. And now it's on to game 3, where it might be a little bit tougher on the draw. Alright guys, so the opponent has taken a mulligan. Our hand is kind of aggressively medium, but we're going to keep it, but it's got like a lot of things going wrong with it. It's another one that would be much better on the play than the draw. We don't have the third land despite having some mana sinks, and we've got a lot of pain between a Fetch and a Bob and a Swift End from Murderous Rider. So it's a little bit all over the place. It's not ideal, but the opponent did mulligan all the way down to 5 for us. That is pretty significant, not gonna lie. So we already kind of outclassed them pretty hard on card quality, and the fact that they mulliganed means they're pretty severely unfavored here. Thalia is a pretty good play for them, though. It's going to complicate our decision-making, that is for sure. So, client seems like it's starting to lag a little bit here. I think we're gonna, in order to avoid any malfunctions, just try using the next turn button. So what we're going to do here, the decision is, do we push Thalia or do we play Bob? I am going to just play Bob. And then we're passing to the OP. Yeah, let's just do the next turn thing. I can kind of sense when the client's not happy with the replay, and I think that's where we're at now. So opponent's going to make a Blade Splicer here. So This is a little bit what we were afraid of. The Thalia on the play can really facilitate a good aggressive curve out, because she's a good attacker against our early plays, and she taxes our removal, so we can't quite keep up sometimes. What we would really love to do, because they're aggressive, is to flip something painless with Bob, and then also to draw a Plague Engineer for turn. What if we did that? How great would that be? Well, that's exactly what we do. Boom! Punched in the gut by the Plague Man. You love to see it. 2 for 1ing them, remaining as a Death Touch creature that can trade with Golem, that can hose other humans that they might have. It is a beautiful thing. We're going to take the 3 from the Golem because we can take another couple hits. We don't want to trade off Plague Man just yet. And they have Leonin Arbiter, but just a Plains to follow it up, no land destruction, and 1 card left in hand. Even though, again, I'm just going to go next turn so we don't lose anything from the client here. We have an interesting decision of whether to Inquisition. That was basically our big call there. I decided not to. I decided that it's likely enough to whiff that we're just going to play to stay ahead. We're already very far ahead. We're just going to play to stay ahead. So that means Liliana Edict, pass holding up Fatal Push. We're going to push the Golem if it attacks before they do anything else. So Golem moves to attacks, we push. They have a Flicker Wisp to bounce a land. Not really that big a deal. The game's getting more complicated, so let's try this again. All right, looks like the client's behaving again. And look at Bob. Bob is such an all-star dude. Oh my god, you love to see it. We've got painless hit after painless hit with the Bobby this time. And opponent's last card in hand after we took up his Path to Exile. So that's fair enough, you know. They're putting up a fight here, but we've got a free pitch with Inquisition, and then it is just value central with Tireless Tracker into a land, into a clue, into a Collective Brutality, escalating, draining, and the opponent is going to go to their draw step and scoop it on up because we just absolutely crushed them on a value access. We started out ahead with them mulling, and then we just kept pulling further and further ahead. First the Plague Man advantage, then the Confidant advantage, then the Liliana advantage, then the Tireless Tracker advantage. It's just insane how far ahead we were, really. Like, miles and miles and miles ahead. So, there we go, guys. That was our great victory over Mono White, Death and Taxes, and that puts us in a really good position in the league. We are 4-1 in this Modern Challenge that is 7 rounds deep, so we've got 2 more to go, and if we make the top 8, then there's the top 8 games to play as well. So what a performance from the deck. It hasn't made it easy on us. Again, it's always been kind of awkward getting there in basically every single win we've had, but the deck is performing. The deck is performing. Long may it continue. Let's go to round 6. All right, my friends, it is round 6 time, and it's a fine keep in a blind game 1. Obviously need to draw the 3rd land and probably the 4th land, but that's not exactly uncommon with our deck, is it? So 2 landers always need a little bit of love, and we hit it right away. So we're against another Urza deck. They have an explosive start with Astrolabe, Opal, Bauble. And we have Inquisition of Kozilek. So we see Urza Lord High Artificer, who we obviously can't take, and Archmage's Charm and a couple lands. So only 1 legal take, then it's back to us. And I think we're going to continue using the next turn function because I just feel the client lagging so hard. I would hate for anything to happen when we've come so far in recording this video, right? So opponent will show us a land that we didn't know about. I believe they just played Misty Rainforest. And it's Thoughtseize time. So we Thoughtseize away that Urza, we play a tapped land. And back to the opponent. They've got Mishra's Bauble going off. They're digging for action. What are they going to find? Well, they have to play an Engineered Explosives out on 0 to turn Mox Opal back on, which is a win for us, but the loss for us is that they found another Urza. Really sucks. Really sucks. So it is Assassin's Trophy time. Just got to take care of the Urza before he gets any more value. You don't like to ramp them. You don't like to be less mana efficient than we could be, but that's clearly the play. And Construct will come after us. We draw Collective Brutality, not the greatest. So I actually thought about going Tracker into land here, of maybe able to take another hit from the Construct, but in the end I did decide to just edict this construct off the field before they find another thing, like something more expendable, like a Gilded Goose. Now, here's the annoying thing about the opponent's deck. I thought Archmage's Charm looked a little bit suspicious, and this is why. They're just leaning on looping Charm with Sanctuary. It's a very good card to loop because it's always got the floor of draw 2 and some other really good modes as well. So they're going to draw 2 off of Charm. They're going to find Goose. They're going to play an Ice Fang. Now it's back over to us. It would have been nice to draw a land here, frankly. It would have been nice to draw a land. But we'll start by ticking up, and we're going to pitch Brutality, just because we have the ability to more cleanly answer the board this way. Plague Man, Naming Snake, very, very good here. If there's one, there's probably 4, right? So that's what we're going to do. But I really despise the design of Mystic Sanctuary. They just get to go fetch another Archmage's Charm. It's just so annoying to play against, isn't it? When you're on a fair deck and they're just like, oh, I have a fetch land. Let me turn it into a tutor. What? Like, I don't understand. I don't understand Throne of Eldraine in general. Really enjoying the theme, really not enjoying most of the design. But rant over. We are at least pricing the opponent into immediately drawing 2 with the Charms, and also throwing the Coatls into the meat grinder of Plague Engineer just to see more cards. And they still haven't really put too much else together, so just to be efficient here on the end step, I'm pretty happy pushing the Goose, or trying to. They will fetch in response. Is this just a food activation, or are they doing something else? They are going to Cryptic Command, so that's annoying. They got the Cryptic as well. This is what they did. I did go so fast that I didn't see what they did, but I think I figured it out. I think they bounced their own EE so they can replay it, and that's actually a little scary with our permanents on 3, but they don't have Opal online yet, so they need to manufacture a different color of mana from somewhere. If I'm remembering correctly, this is what's going down. So we're going to go ahead and Thoughtseize. We see Archmage's Charm, our best friend, and EE. And the Thoughtseize, to be fair, was an amazing draw, because it lets us totally empty out their hand, and we get to totally empty out our own hand, so we have asymmetrical discard, and we're even more vulnerable to EE on 3 now, but they don't have it. So they have an unknown in hand back to us. We'll attack before we do anything, see what they drew, see if this draws anything out. And it's nothing. So I actually chose, I think leaving Liliana on 3 is totally fine. It means we have an Edict and we can still keep her around. I don't think like working toward an ult is a huge deal right now, especially starting all the way down at 3. So I would rather just hold my trophy. And I am rewarded for doing so, because the opponent has an Urza. With his trigger on the stack before he can do anything at all, hopefully, I'm going to try to trophy it. But, sadly for us, the opponent has something to do in response here. Let's just hit play. Metallic Rebuke. So, we're pretty punished for not taking up Lily in a way. Then again, we would have lost our trophy anyway, or used it on like an Opal or something. So, whatever. Not that big a deal. We're going off a little bit with the tracker. We're edicting the opponent. And going off with the tracker is nice, because it means we have really good attacks here. The opponent goes down to 1. We edict the construct. We have a land in hand. And the opponent has 1 turn to put something good together with their top deck, plus whatever Urza can find them. Urza finds them an EE, which they just play for 0, and then they attack Liliana, which is super interesting, and then they just play the Polluted Delta and pass. So I guess they're representing another Mystic Sanctuary. We're just going to try to do our thing here. So we play a land, we make a clue, and we find a Scavenging Ooze. That's all well and good, but I think I just want to go for lethal here. So if we are going to price them into doing something, we might as well do it here. I guess they could find a Cryptic Command. I don't know if they have a 3rd Mystic Sanctuary to fetch, and obviously that's a turn too slow, putting Cryptic on the top anyway. So they find Gilded Goose, and the fact that they could find a blocker here is just more incentive for us to do this. So we get there. It's not showing them scooping, but they scoop to this, and that was that. So winning game 1 against what looks like a more typical of the top of the meta right now, Sultai Simic Urza deck, not the Whirza variant we saw round 2. Definitely great. And again, we do get better post side. So that was awesome, my friends. We got there with a nice variety of disruption and threats. Good game. Let's go to game 2. Alright guys, well, we've got a hand with Collector Ouphe, and it's a functional one. It's got some decent stuff otherwise. It is a certain keep if you ask me. So the opponent will kick us off, keeping 7, playing out some crap. We draw Plague Man, sure. Sight of Plague Man reminds me, sideboarding is a little bit different. I like Veil of Summer, player draw here against this variant, and I'm not as high on Plague Man, so I brought in 1, left 1 out. Otherwise, it's a lot of the same stuff. We love Ouphes, we love Choke, we love Vraska, stuff like that. You want to end up with 1 to 2 Lilies in your deck post side, depending on your configuration. I did end up cutting Hexdrinker too, just to lean a little bit more heavily on disruption. We have both Collective Brutalities in here, and Hexdrinker specifically is a liability against Archmage's Charm, in addition to just being like generally okay, fine card, but can be answered by a lot of things, including EE. So normally I'd leave in a Hexdrinker, but against this Archmage's Charm variant, I hope you understand why I sided him out. And in Collective Brutality, because they are on Metallic Rebuke, Cryptic Command, Archmage's Charm, and also on Gilded Goose that we can kill with it, seems better. So here's exactly what I mean, guys. You gotta sideboard against what you see, and that's what I'm doing here. Pretty happy with my sideboarding calls. And Dark Confidant's the play. It's a nice draw, and that's our play. Obviously, it can die here, but we're gonna make them have something. They're shocking in, and it's Ice Fang on the end step. And then it's the untap, Fetchland, Oko Thief of Crowns, and the opponent is actually attacking. I think that's kind of a bold attack, but whatever, fair enough. They know, it might make sense in the context of their hand. Okay, so we have a great hand, and we just have to figure out how best to use it. There's a lot of pretty valid lines. I think, frankly, Plague Man naming Snake is a valid line just to get it in under counter magic, and just because it's that good. Also, going wide against Oko never hurts, but also the discard is it's prime time for discard right now. So I did ultimately decide that Thoughtseizing was actually the best, because if we're only going, Thoughtseizing lets us have the most options to follow up. We can just make one play here, and then we can trophy or Ouphe to follow up. Or we can actually just Inquisition as well. It all depends on what we want to see. Or what we need to do, but Thoughtseize will let us take care of an Urza, and that's exactly what we do. Now, granted, they don't have the 4th mana yet, but I still think it's definitely correct to take the Urza there. And then we get to also go wide, hose a little bit of what they're up to with Collector Ouphe. So I am very happy with that turn, even though we didn't get the Plague Man down under counter magic, but maybe the opponent will be making some plays here that are a little bit more proactive than that anyway. They do go EE on 2. And then they attack us with Coatl. And then they activate it. So first they elked us with Oko, and then they activate the freedom to activate EE. Again, honestly, this is fine with me. It's kind of a 2 for 2, because they lose their Coatl, we lose 2 things. We price them into elking our board instead of elking their board or making more food. I think overall it's fine, and it also guaranteed used up all their mana, so we have full reign to have a full turn this turn. But you could see, obviously, sequencing in other ways, sequencing around EE a little bit more carefully, but frankly, I'm just a little bit more worried about the value of Oko and Archmage's Charm, so that's why I was not as committed to protecting my Ouphe at all costs. We want to lead off with Inquisition here, I think, just getting one of these charms out of their hand while we've got free reign to do so, and then we've got the Swift End to neatly deal with Oko. So opponents got, the Astrolabe, they've got the Charm, but I think we're ahead on resources right now. And then it is going to be back to us, and we're going to kick things off by casting the Rider. I think it's the most expendable, proactive thing to do right now. Then we play Peatland because it's going to let us hold up Trophy, also hold up Peatland itself. So we kind of got something down under the counter magic, and they didn't have that efficient turn, at least so we hoped. But on the end step, they do have Coatl. The card is pretty tough for us to beat unless we've got Plague Man Naming Snake. And speaking of cards that we hate to see, Mystic Sanctuary, buying back Archmage's Charm, really hate facing this loop. Can't say it enough. They're gassing out. They've got Astrolabe here. They're going to town. And they are holding up the Charm, holding back the Snake. We do decide to cash in Peatland looking for more action. We don't really find it. We find a land and a Tarmogoyf. So I lead on Tarmogoyf to try to draw out the Charm, and that's just a 1-for-1 trade as opposed to them drawing 2 off of it, which I think is fine. And Goyf is not even good against Coatl anyway, so I'm pretty happy drawing that out, and then we get to follow up with the Plague Man Naming Snake. Now that's a good turn. That's a pretty good turn for us, not gonna lie. So Murderous Rider coming across, showing them the meaning of lifelink. Opponent will pass, holding up Charm, 1 unknown in hand. We're just going to move straight to attacks. We don't have all that much going on. Quagmire, kind of medium draw. It's fine, right? But not great, but we'll play it out. We are holding up Castle Locthwain at this stage, and we have a nice life buffer thanks to Murderous Rider, and also, of course, holding up Trophy. Opponent going to cash in the Charm for another draw, too. It's just such a good consistency tool for them against a deck like ours. And then they've got another Snake that just dies on impact, but draws them a card. So you can see just how powerful Plague Engineer really is. Like, we would be totally unable to beat all these Snakes without the Plague Man. Not gonna lie. So, unfortunately for us, opponent has found Oko. I'm just going to Trophy now with another spell on the stack. Maybe making their Metallic Rebuke a little bit worse, whatever, even though they can obviously cast it. But Trophy resolves, so we have dealt with Oko. 2 unknowns in hand, what's it going to be, OP? Well, we're max punished. We're max punished for this because they have another Oko. Yeah, that really sucks. Not going to lie, that really sucks. They're going to make an Elk, and now we cannot activate Castle this turn either. Field of Ruin we could have activated, but I didn't really see any point in doing so. We draw another land. Pretty bad. At least one. That's one we can cash in, but we hit another land. Oh no. Oh no, not like this. So all we can really do, I think, here is attack with Hissing Quagmire. Unfortunately, Elk blocks Rider really well. But Plague Engineer has already seen off 3 of the 4 Snakes that are in their deck, so at this point, I'm okay trading it, just because we gotta keep pressuring. So we've got 2 Death Touch 2/2s coming across. One trades with the Elk, the other depletes Oko's loyalty a little bit. Opponent going off with Bauble into Bauble, making an Elk, finding Opals. If they didn't have the second Oko, they would be doing absolutely nothing here, but as it is, they're forcing us to direct attacks his way, blocking up the board with Elks. We draw another Plague Engineer. And actually, at this stage, it is correct to name Elk, because now our Murderous Rider can attack over the Elks, and that's actually really important. So, again, so many amazing use cases for Plague Man. Even when he's not obviously at his best at any given time, that's pretty great. The only regret is that not only have we flooded on Blooming Marshes, so we could not attack with Quagmire this turn either, and that's kind of rough. It just gives the opponent that much more time to draw out of being behind. And they started off with a Gilded Goose. Once again, a card that would be very much just a nothing card, but Oko makes it great. So they got the Geese, they got the Elks, all protecting the Oko, and once again we brick. So we're going to play out the Blooming Marsh so that this is a little bit less painful when we activate Castle. Once again, we're not activating Quagmire this turn, but I would rather see a new card, and we are rewarded with a Collective Brutality for the second time this league, turning a dead Thoughtseize into gold. We get to kill an Elk with it because Plague Man is shrinking Elks. That is awesome. And we get to drain the opponent for 2. So that was a pretty nice find. And we do attack just with the Murderous Rider, because now with this Plague Man naming Elk as opposed to Snake, I'm less inclined to want to trade it off. So if they want to turn ours into an Elk, I think that's better than us trading with their Elk. So Rider is the only attack. We put Oko down to 1. Opponent in total top deck mode finds Urza, as you do when you're playing this deck. So definitely pretty rough, you know, if we just had faded that. maybe for one turn we'd be in business, but they've got all kinds of stuff going on. They find Coatl, and we are just in all kinds of trouble. So we find Liliana, not particularly good here. We just out of nowhere, just because they top-decked an Urza, we are vastly far behind on board. We can no longer get through to the Oko. So instead we just kind of have to pass, and as we did against Whirza at one point, I'm just ticking Liliana up. Like, ticking down doesn't do enough. We're going to tick up. We're going to try to defend her or defend our life total long enough to reach ult somehow. We also, there's a Metallic Rebuke that I think has been gotten out of their hand, maybe because they were tapped out. I can't remember. I went by that a little bit too quickly. But in any case, it's Urza time. It's Urza time. Finding a Cryptic command. They're just going to main phase it, bouncing Plague Man, drawing a card. We're going to Castle Locthwain in response, because it's a little more efficient with our life total, and because that's kind of our plan for the turn anyway. They got the Goose. I guess we should just hit play here. As you can tell, we are pretty dead. We did play it out, we're ahead on the clock, as usual. They find another Urza, though, and they've just got absolutely everything, so we make them see that they have lethal, and that's going to do it. They make more food before damage, and that is going to be sufficient to make Construct lethal. It's not like we had any outs anyway, so I said, let's just make them see it, and they saw it. So, out of nowhere, Oko prolonging the game, Urza burying us. This is a familiar refrain in Modern. You interact so well, you have such a good game, and then the value of these cards is kind of unbeatable a lot of the time. And it's specifically because Oko, they have all these enablers. I know I'm not saying anything that people don't know, but like Gilded Goose, Mox Opal, Arkham's Astrolabe, Engineered Explosives, these are all cards that enable some really good 2-for-1s or some really explosive turns at the cost of being bad top decks in the case of the Dorks or the Opals, and high variants are clunky in the case of EE. But with Oko around, Oko's amazing in his own right, and he just turns them all into 3/3s. It's insane. I really don't like it. Like, I'm not complaining just because I lost. I genuinely don't like these play patterns. I don't expect that Oko will survive forever in Modern. That I can tell you. That's my prediction, but who knows. In any case, guys, we were lucky enough to win Game 1, so we're still in it with a fight. Let's go to Game 3, see if we can do better on the play. Okay, my friends, it's the decisive game against Simic, Oko, Urza, and we've got a hand. We don't have a turn 1 play, but we've got Bob and Choke on the play with some good backup. This should really be roughly as good as it gets. We would have loved turn 1 discard, but you can't complain, right? You really can't complain. Opponent goes turn 1, Gilded Goose. That's actually a little bit scary because one of their best plays against our progression is turn 2 Oko. So we hope they don't have that. We just draw land. All we can do is jam good old Bobby, and hope it's going to be enough. Opponent pressed into the 0 mana EE to turn on Opal, and to turn on Goose by cashing in food, and sure enough, it's everyone's favorite, it's Oko. But the opponent kept a 1-lander. So they kept a 1-lander, we have a Choke, and we have an uncontested Bob. Now we draw Fatal Push. That's a good way to kill Gilded Goose. That's a pretty sweet one as well. But I think for now what we really have to do is just choke them out, start pressuring Oko, and hope that they don't draw out of it. So, they have Gilded Goose number 2. At least we have some ways to kill them, but they also have made an Elk, and they're actually attacking us with the Elk. I don't know if this is the right line or not. You'd think they would kind of need to sit behind the Oko as much as possible and protect him as much as possible. On the other hand, maybe they feel that, this is just the plan. They just have to race us and hope our Bob does enough damage, and hope they get there that way. So we have drawn a land off of Bob and Collector Ouphe for turn. These are some very, very good draws. So Collector Ouphe is going to shut off Mox Opal. It's going to hose their mana even harder. It's also going to shut off food tokens, kind of, but the Geese can still turn them into mana. So it's actually a pretty tough call here, and I do decide actually to just start cleaning up the board as much as possible. So instead of playing Ouphe, we're going to Liliana, and we're going to Edict. Or are we? Because the stupidest card printed in 2019, and I'm not kidding, I think this is dumber than Oko, dumber than Once Upon a Time, dumber than Hogak, the stupidest card of 2019 is Veil of Summer, and Veil of Summer blows us out. And if we're going to push, we've got to do it now with Veil on the stack, and we do want to, because our plan was to Edict one thing, push the other, attack the Oko. And that's kind of what we have to do, but they blow us out so hard with Veil, countering our Edict, drawing a card, and then Oko gets to do his Oko thing again, making Elks and racing us. And now, because they had Veil of Summer blowing out our removal, that's definitely a lot more attractive, their decision to attack last turn. Because now we're under pressure. And Bob is going to flip something painful and something that's not that great in the context of what's going on a second Collector Ouphe. Not that great. So we tick up with Liliana. And then it's kind of an interesting call here as to what else to do. I picked the Catacombs just because it's painful. We get an Urza out of their hand, that's pretty cool. So I'm thinking, okay, I think the thing to do here is we have to kill Oko at all costs. We just can't beat the army of Elks. So first we're going to try to trophy the Oko. Then if that resolves, we're going to try to play an Ouphe and maybe have to start double blocking Elks, as bad as that is, but maybe we can follow up with another Ouphe. But, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters when your opponent is on another Veil of Summer. So, we just get absolutely blown out, crushed by Veil of Summer. Insane. It's insane. And so I just keep pressuring the Oko, like, what else are we going to do? We just can't beat the card. We just can't beat the card unless we beat it, if you know what I mean. So we're priced into the chump block here. We're down to 2. And they're just coming at us, ignoring Liliana, which is, of course, the right play. They're totally choked out. Arkham's Astrolabe into Mishra's Bauble for more Elk goodness. We flip another dead Thoughtseize. We're at 1. We just have no way to do anything to beat these Elks. Guys, we lost on the play with uncontested Bob into choke. And it's literally because of Oko and Veil of Summer. We had backup too. We had turn 4 Liliana into Fatal Push. We had Collector Ouphes and Assassin's Trophies waiting in the wings, and we were making our land drops. But those cards, man, those cards. This was enough, I'm not just being results-oriented. I don't mind losing to a sweet Humans Curve Out. I don't mind losing to a tight game against Burn. I don't mind losing against that Taxes deck we played in round 5. This just makes me not want to play a fair deck whatsoever. And if I don't want to play a fair deck, if I'm ever feeling that way, we got a problem, right? We got a problem, because that's all I basically ever want to do is interact and play fair decks. But Veil of Summer and Oko just punish you so incredibly hard for trying to do that. And, opponent had a nut draw here relative to ours, there's no question about it. But, I mean, they kept a one-lander, and the one-lander got choked out, but they still operated off of, opals and food tokens to blow us out with 1-mana cryptic commands. It's just a tilt. But I think if we had won this one, we would have secured top 8 probably, because I believe I was at 14th place going into it, and winning here would have put us right at least in contention for top 8. But anyway, we fall to 4-2. It's a bad one, but hey, we're still going to finish the 7-round challenge positive, and we still might have an outside chance of a high placement if we win round 7. So let's move on to the final round of the Swiss. Alright guys, well, it's the final round. It's been a good one. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think we've had some pretty bad luck here. We've taken a ton of mulligans. We've lost most die rolls as well, and this is no exception. We've lost the die roll, and we've got a mulligan, an unkeepable one-lander. This is another one-lander, but, do we really want to go to 5 in a blind game 1? You know how I hate to do that, right? So this time, though, I did have the discipline perhaps to go to 5, and frankly, we've got a pretty good 5. It's the classic BGX curve out of discard into Goyf into Lily. So it's about as good as you can expect in a blind game 1 from a 5. Opponent did mulligan as well, it appears, down to 6. And it's another Arkham's Astrolabe deck. How lovely, how lovely. We draw Scooze, sure, that seems fine. It's a little bit of a different change of pace, though. We see that we are against Bant Snow Control, and they have Monolith, Quattle, and Dovin's Veto. I decide to take the Quattle because I'm pretty happy to run out Scooze next turn to try to trade with the Monolith, and then whether or not they do that, we can resolve the Goyf next turn under Dovin's veto and try to win with the Goyf. And if they let the Skoos resolve, well, Skoos can do a lot of work against them. We can maybe Thoughtseize and activate Skoos instead of jamming Goyf into the leak, something like that. So I really like running out Skoos here as bait, and they don't take the bait, so fair enough. It's back to us. They'll play out the field, and they will pass. And we draw the third land, so that's pretty cool. So we play that out. This is going to let us Thoughtseize and then follow up with the Goyf. And instead they will Dovin's veto as expected. I said instead. And now we got the perfect window for Goyf. So we've engineered the perfect way around their permission. Their mana leak is now kind of rotting in hand, and they're probably all in on finding a verdict. But we can only play around so much. We already mulliganed to 5. We can't play around verdicts with our hand. And wouldn't you know it, they find the verdict, and they don't even need the right mana for it because Astrolabe is awesome. So, after all that, things lining up pretty well for us, we just get blown out by verdict. But hey, silver lining, they had to tap out, we get to resolve a Lily under the mana leak. So, we do actually have some hope in this game because Liliana's very good against control decks. They pitch a path, they're sitting on mana leak +1 unknown. Collective Brutality is our play, and we're going to go for it. Yeah, it's a little bit weaker to not just tick up against, Cryptic Command, but whatever. We can't play around everything. So we go for the Brutality, they're going to leak it, and then we're going to tick up Lily, and we get a land out of the hand. Okay. Fair enough. So Liliana is our second wind. Liliana is putting in a lot of work here. And they're in total top deck mode. What do they top deck? Obviously, Oko. So here's where we really need a great top deck of our own. And guess what, guys? We got one. So it's been looking pretty grim here a couple different occasions, but we've had the ability to recover a couple different occasions as well. So it's back to full top deck mode, and the opponent finds Teferi Time Raveler. So finding a Planeswalker when in top deck mode, obviously pretty good. Astrolabe, so they're continuing to see lots of draws, and we once again draw an answer. This is a beautiful draw, because we do get to use it, do something proactive, take care of a Planeswalker, and then we get to tick Liliana up. Now, I didn't want to lose her to the ult, so we're going for a higher upside line here of tick her up, and then hopefully ult next turn still have her around. But we just got a fade at Cryptic Command here. What do you think they have? Obviously the Cryptic Command. So, at every turn in this league, we just have to really, really work for it. But hey, they're tapped out. It's Liliana. She's going to come back down unless they have Force of Negation, right? And they don't. So Liliana coming back down, continuing to be a major thorn in OP's side, getting a Path to Exile out of the hand. So once again, they kind of just want to top deck a Planeswalker, and for the third time straight they do. This time it's Jace the Mind Sculptor. Yeah, this is where our league starts to turn once again for the worse you feel, but hey, we're continuing to draw action. We will draw Unearth, and we're going to Unearth the Goyf. Yeah, there's a little bit of minor incentive to Unearth Skoos, but I think the huge size of Goyf is just more what I'm interested in here. And we tick Lily up, Force of Negation goes out of the hand. And we could have fielded or we could have cracked Peatland. I went for the Peatland, and we find Questing Beast. If we draw a green land next turn, that's actually going to be very good. Or if the opponent's last card is Path, that's also very good. So, alright, this is a super intense back and forth, and it is once again a top deck war, but the opponent has a Jace. That said, if they decide to simply activate Jace, then with the Brainstorm, then that's actually going to work pretty well for us. They are going to, on their own upkeep, Field of Ruin, I guess shuffling away some bad cards from before us. Now, this should be kind of a red flag to the opponent, or I was worried that it would be that we went and got a Greenland, because obviously we play at least one basic swamp. Why would we not get at least one black land off of that? So I was worried they would read us for QB and they would Fate Seal to put Jace up out of range, but they don't. They just Brainstorm instead. Maybe reading us for it and deciding that it's good enough to just Brainstorm because they're going to find another Oko anyway. So everything sucks. Life is hard. But opponent will attack us with the food token, so I guess pretty clearly not reading us for QB. And because we drew Fatal Push, we are pretty happy to simply Edict, take the Edict value, and then attack. Yeah, we crack the opponent for 4, we kill the Jace. QBOP. That is really, really nice. Opponent does, of course, get to Elk our QB, but there's no way around that. We draw an Inquisition, so we've got some dead cards in hand, but hey, we've got an Elk, right? We've got an Elk. Pressured into attacking the Oko, or priced into attacking the Oko, rather. And then we've got a pass. At least Field can fix our mana a little bit to turn these cards on, but I'd rather hold up Fatal Push than main phase an Inquisition in that spot. So Oko will make himself an Elk. Then on step, we've got to fix our mana, so we're fielding a Hallowed Fountain. And opponent looks like they thought about fielding us in response too, but instead opting not to. End step, we're definitely pushing here. Gotta be mana efficient when we're only on 1 black mana. And it resolves, so that's cool. Treetop Village, a cool draw as well. So we're gonna open on Inquisition, see what we can see. Of course, they got Snapcaster Mage for Cryptic Command. It never ends with these decks. It never, ever ends. So we get blown out by that. We play Treetop. Of course, they have a couple Fields of Ruin, but what are you gonna do? So we are just going to field one of their fields while we can, before they untap. And that's about all we got. Their last card is a Path to Exile, so hey, at least we attacked beforehand, right? That's the silver lining, but we're also out of basics now. And they're going to field our threat. We don't get a basic off of it. It's all pretty bad, and Oko's just doing Oko things. We draw a pretty dead card in the form of Inquisition. Maybe it can force something through later, but for now, it's not what we want to see. They're coming across, hitting us for 5. We draw Trophy. So, Inquisition the opponent. They've got another Snapcaster Mage and another whatever. It doesn't matter. We scoop to this because we're just losing to the beats on the board as it is. What a tilt. What a tilt. So, they kind of, at one occasion, before getting ulted, they needed to top deck a Cryptic Command in like 2 turns, and they did. They had 2 draw steps, they top deck Cryptic. 3 separate times, guys, they were in total top deck mode, and they top decked a Planeswalker. I mean, also on top of that, we mulliganed to 5, and we had no choice but to kind of play into a Verdict. They found a Verdict on curve. You couldn't really get much unluckier than this. Besides our deck just not functioning. Now, granted, we had some good top decks at some good spots too, but it is hard to overstate just how insane their top decks were, really. So, starting to feel punished for playing my deck at this stage of the league. Just running into Okos, losing to the snow cards, but it was only game 1. It was only game 1. We are still live to take him down post side. Let's see what we can do. Alright guys, so some interesting sideboarding here against Bant control. I had never actually faced it until this game, and I do, they're a Path to Exile control deck. I think we're supposed to side out a land. I sided out Field of Ruin, simply because they're showing me so many basics, that's all. Might not be correct, might still be better to side out like a Blooming Marsh or something, but I did opt for that, and for similar reasons, for all those basics, I decided not to bring in Fulminator Mages to attack them on different axes. So we're trimming around the edges, Fatal Pushes can come out. Even though they have snakes, that's not a good way to combat the snakes, and there's not much else that we want to push. That's a good target. Unearth can come out. It's a little too reactive. I think fine ultimately to leave in, but we had room to bring it out, so I did. Trimming 1 Scooze was fine too. We got a lot of good cards to bring in though. Vraska, Golgari Queen comes in. We brought in a second Plague Man because I don't think we want all 3. It's a little bit too underwhelming as a 2/2 for 3 against their Planeswalkers, but again, to beat the snakes, it's our best way to do it, so we play 2, we hedge. Choke obviously comes in here, and Collective Brutality, and Veil of Summer. So we've got a lot of good cards to bring in. Let's see what we can do here. Well, once again, our opening hand is very awkward, but this one's got a lot of incentives to keep it. We've got quadruple discard spells, so you know what? We're going to say, we've mulliganed so much this league, we're just going to let it rip with a 1-lander with triple Inquisition and a Thoughtseize. And opponent's got the triple snake hand, so this is a hand that we would never ever beat by mulliganing, because it's just got too many hyper effective 2-for-1s, unless we landed a timely Plague Man perhaps, but even so, I'm so happy that we kept this hand and that we were rewarded with the land right off the top. Feels so good to just rip apart this deck's hand, take away all your snakes, and then back to you. So this is kind of the second time we've done this. I believe we did it to an Amulet Titan player early in the league, but once again, just like in that match, we don't have a threat. So step 1, we've achieved the land drops. Step 2 is to achieve the threat. We don't have the threat yet, so we're just kind of playing Drago, which is not really where we want to be. We want to be jamming a Planeswalker on curve or something, but we're not. But we do draw a Choke. So what else are we going to do? We don't have the ability to clear the path with Thoughtseize, just going to try to jam the Choke. That we know about their entire hand except for one card. So is there one unknown, a piece of permission? Well, why wouldn't it be? Oh, it's Dovin's Veto, Tilt City. I don't remember which land is no longer in their hand of these. Let's say it's Plains, that's probably correct. So back to us. We don't get them with Choke. I don't remember if I said that we sided in Nihil Spellbombs, but we sided in those as well, and we draw one of them. Once again, I just thought it was so unlikely that the one card they drew was permission, so I wanted to sandbag Thoughtseize, but they just drew a Snapcaster Mage, so Snapcaster Dovin's Veto. It's ridiculous. Our luck here turning a little bit ridiculous, but we're not out of it yet. We still do have a lot of good things in hand. So the opponent's going to field us, start aggressively taxing our basics here. They play another field, and we draw a Bob. So now we don't have the requisite colors to clear the way for Bob, so all we can really do is jam him and hope for the best. Bob will resolve, at least. That is step 1. Opponent coming across with Snappy, certainly not blocking you. And then what? Then what have they found? They have found EE on 2, so it's a clunky answer. Takes up their whole turn and loses their snap, but an answer nevertheless. So I think they just have one land of some kind in hand. Let's just close that off. Back to us, we draw Blooming Marsh. Okay, not terribly exciting here, but we're going to field their field while we can. That's kind of a fine thing to do, I guess. And we're just going to let the client catch up to us here. Hold up a moment here, then maybe hit play. I really don't want to have anything go south with the client here, so I'm just going to hit play for a minute. I think we went into Drago territory for a while. We sandbag that land because we do play one copy of Tireless Tracker. And then it's Vraska Golgari Queen, so we Thoughtseize to clear the path for her. And then we get a Celestial Purge out of their hand. We see just a land as well. It's Vraska time, so what a great sequence it was for us. We cash in a land, we tick up, we find a Bob. We keep the Vraska chain going. We're going to try the Skoos out as bait for counter magic, and sure enough, they found a Cryptic command right off the top, so that's obviously pretty rough, but hey, at least we sequenced the right way, we get to stick at Bob. Vraska taking up, and look at that. Look at their next draw. Snap their 2 draws. Okay, hold up, slow down. So their top deck was a Cryptic command after they had only lands in hand, and then off of the Cryptic draw plus the draw step, it's Snapcaster Mage and Oko. Really? Really? So I'm kind of at the end of my rope with the variants here, but we're still in it. You know, Bob's an elk, but we're still in it. And hey, we had some answers in hand, so we get to trophy Oko. And then, hey, we draw another Bob, so that's actually kind of good right now. We get to get aggressive with this elk, and whereas 2 Bobs might be a bit of a liability, 1 Bob is just fine. So we Thoughtseize, even at the risk of our life total. It lets us know exactly how to sequence. We're turning them all sideways. We're offering this trade. I think that's totally fine because Bob has served his purpose and it makes us less soft to a verdict, I guess, in some ways. We're continuing to draw threats. We continue to put pressure on. For the reasons of aforementioned verdict, I do decide to sandbag the Skoos, and the opponent just didn't have anything, so they had a flurry of insane top decks, and then they kind of petered out. They seem to have flooded and or drawn permission in the last couple turns, while a 7-8 Tarmogoyf and a 3-3 Elk took them to beat town. So there you go, guys. There you go. Another win for the good guys, and we take Bant control to the mat, taking them to round 3, playing for the 5 and 2. That was variance all over the place. All over the place. I won't dwell on it too long because it's been a super long video, but we had the 4 discard 1 land opener, and we drew out of it, so that was lucky. Then the opponent just like ripping permission with 1 unknown in hand back to stop choke and to stop Spellbomb on curve, and then it's a back and forth, and then they're a little flooded, and then they top deck nutty stuff, and then they're flooded again, and we just have enough threats to just turn our dummies sideways and win. So, pretty crazy match. Pretty crazy game, not gonna lie. Let's play the final game of this challenge right here, right now. And here it is, the decisive one, my friends, and we've got a nice curve, you know, we've got Disruption, we've got a Goyf, we've got functional lands, we will keep. We will keep. We hope the opponent mulligans to Oblivion here, but sadly they're going to keep 7 as well. And they will kick things off by playing a simple fetch land and passing. We draw Plague Man, sure. We're priced into using Peatland here for Inquisition, but our life total is a resource for sure in this matchup. But guess what? Guess what? Did you think we were not going to get Veil of Summer? Because that's never going to happen. We're going to eat a Veil of Summer whenever it's optimal for the opponent. So, just grotesque. I never ever want to see that card again. Truly. Anyway, enough of that. Back to us. We're just drawing more threats, so we kind of don't have anything to do here but, like, play our stuff out one thing at a time. We don't have any information anymore because of Veil of Summer. We're behind on resources because of Veil of Summer, and now they got another 2-for-1 that lines up well in the form of Ice Fang, and they have Oko on curve as always. Notably, they do not have Death Touch, but we will nevertheless decay Oko rather than messing around, you know, trying to attack him off the field over a couple turns. I do just like the decay there, so no block yet for the Coatl, but now they have the 4th land. They will have Death Touch online if they so desire. So it's back to us. We're just going to go ahead and attack. We're going to offer the trade here. We could jam Plague Engineer main phase, but I think that's kind of risky in terms of the risk versus reward. So I'm cool trading this Elk off, whereas if it was a Goyf that hadn't been Elked, I would have just tried to jam Plague Man and see what happened. We lead on Spellbomb to try to maybe draw out permission. The opponent hesitated. I kind of got the impression they were sandbagging permission, so I decided to make their turn awkward by just saying go, and it worked. They didn't have anything to flash in, so they just didn't do anything on their turn 4. Kind of cool. That's a tempo victory for us, but they have Jace the Mind Sculptor, so they're going to go ahead and Brainstorm. Now, this is an interesting decision as to when to trophy, because if we trophy now, they're less likely to have Force of Negation to protect it, but if we let this all resolve, and then we wait till the end step to trophy, they're less likely to have something better to do second main, and we don't mess up their shuffle. So you could go either way here. I did decide that I wanted to secure the kill on Jace here, be more likely to anyway, so we trophy in response to the Brainstorm, but there are definitely incentives to do it either before or on the end step. It really just depends on what you are trying to play around. The opponent has a Celestial Colonnade. We have a Field of Ruin. There was a big temptation to just hit the Colonnade right there, but right now they have no way to deal with our field, so I decided it was better to play Goyf, hold up Spellbomb. Back to the OP, and we're holding up Trophy as well, right? So back to the OP, they have another Jace. Like, every time we spend resources killing one Planeswalker, they kind of seem to have another this league. Not every time, that's not fair to say, but it certainly happens. At the risk of, like, we can't play around Monolith anyway unless we draw an untapped land next turn, so at the risk of whatever permission, we do just try to trophy on the end step, and hey, it works. So they're getting 3-for-1s with the Jace every time they find one, because they get a land plus the Brainstorm, plus trade 1-for-1, but hey, at least we're taking care of them, right? So the opponent pretty far ahead of us on resources, but we've got a big old Goyf coming across. See what they have an answer to it. They have a Coatl. Pretty rough. We could have played around this by trying to just, like, blindly jam a Plague Man in the main phase, but I don't think that's a really rational thing to do. So they had it. That sucks. It's another 2-for-1 in their favor. What are you going to do? So here we could either play Liliana and then tick up losing the Plague Man, and also not holding up Spellbomb, or we could just simply name Plague Man, play Plague Man after the fact. So, if they didn't have permission in hand, maybe it would have been better to simply jam Plague Man main phase. I don't know, but that's so much worse against permission, so much worse against a verdict, and they had 5 cards in hand, so again, I think it's kind of fine to do either one. I also think it's fine to continue in the standoff mode with Spellbomb. One explanation for their lack of action is they have at least 1 Snapcaster Mage in hand, so we're just continuing to kind of be patient, try to pick our spot for the Spellbomb, and they have a path for the Plague Man, which is fine with us ultimately. Second up, we're going to try to resolve a Bob, and he resolves. That's pretty amazing. Not going to lie, didn't really expect that to happen. But they've got another Coatl, so they're finding these at the right times to play around our Plague Man, and they've just got another natural path, so they've got all kinds of crap, right? They've got all kinds of stuff. I think we're sequencing about as well as you can really expect to around the highest variety of things, but they're just kind of ahead of us. They have been for a while. And they then field our field. We're now unable to answer their Colonnade as things stand. Remember, we have sided out 1 field because we never saw a Colonnade until right now here in Game 3. So we're definitely cracking Peatland here. Look how far ahead on the clock we are too, so that's a factor as well. But in any case, we draw Blooming Marsh, we draw Tarmogoyf. These things are distinctly average against what they're up to, but we're going to try it. We're going to try for it. Let's see if the Liliana resolves first. It's going to give us the highest variety of options, but it does not look like she will. It is Cryptic Command time. There's nothing they don't have, so we play out the Goyf, which isn't even very good against Coatl, but at least it's something. We play out the Marsh, and that's all we got. We're against their 5 cards, and their Death Toucher, and their Colonnade. It's a Goyf and a Spellbomb against the world. Will we get there? Will we fade some good stuff from the OP? Well, they're going to try to come right after us here. They're going to try to race, hitting us for 4, leaving back the 1/1 blocker. Hey there, QB, a heck of a draw. Will it resolve? Will our client proceed? I'm just going to hit play here at the risk of upsetting the client. And yeah, all we can do is turn them both sideways. They cannot block QB, they can only block Goyf. So that's what they do. It might be the better block anyway, but hey, you know what? QB, what a great top deck, giving us some hope here, giving us some real hope. But opponent has a Supreme Verdict. Okay, I mean, we didn't expect them to have nothing, I guess. And all things considered, Verdict is kind of an okay thing for them to have, but a little bit rough, you gotta say. So they're going for the Colonnade. They're just trying to race, so now we are priced into Spellbombing, looking for more action. It's a safe time to do it because they're tapped out. Of course, they can untap and have a Snapcaster, but what are you going to do about that? Really nothing. So we Liliana, we tick up. It's not even very good, but hey, we are not dead on board to the Colonnade. And normally, Liliana late game can be a little bit bad against Colonnade because they can just attack her off the field in 1 hit, but that helps us race if they feel pressed into doing that, right? So it's all a little bit medium, but potentially promising until they show us Celestial Purge taking care of our Quagmire, so there goes our outside chance of racing them. And then it's Colonnade time again. Are they going to kill Lily? Nope, they're going to put us to 1. And then they have EE on 3 just to take care of Lily. We draw a fetch land, just kind of symbolizing the degree to which we have flooded and bricked at certain stages of the game against these blue decks this league. And we do the noble thing, we take our own lives at the hands of a Verdant Catacombs. Just kind of emblematic of how our losses at least have gone. So, it was a heartbreaker, guys. It was a heartbreaker. We were 4-1 in 14th place, as I recall, going into the other rounds. And then we were so favored with our opening hand in Game 3, Round 6, I cannot even tell you, with Bob into choke and an otherwise great hand on the play. But we got just stymied by a nut draw involving turn 2 Oko. All of the 1-mana artifacts to operate their 1-mana cryptic commands with Veil of Summer despite keeping a 1-lander that got choked out. And then here against Bant control, again, they just never didn't top deck a Planeswalker when they were in top deck mode. They just never failed to have the right answers at the right times, for the most part, game 2 accepted. So these were some demoralizing matches, but my friends, we come out 4-3, we come out positive in the first ever challenge, despite Rock not being that well positioned, despite running into some very bad matchups. I think we had 5 unfavorable matchups. Maybe Oko decks are more 50-50, especially the Whirza one, but I think the one packing a million Veils of Summer in Cryptics and the Archmage's Charm Loop, that's got to be unfavored. And then these Bant decks, we did have a favorable matchup in Mono White Taxes and in Burn, but beyond that, it was all pretty rough stuff, so we still came out ahead, and we got placed. We came in 32nd place exactly, and they publish the top 32 usually for these things, so we even got published for a mere 4-3. I guess we had pretty good pairings as well. The pairings, in other words, we were against good players, and that affects your place. Players who had done well in the challenge. So I'm rambling. Let's cut to the wrap up. All right, my friends, and there you have it. 7 rounds and 21 games. Every single match went to the mat, went to game 3, and most of them were wicked close. This was as much, you got as much value out of your 7-round tournament if you're looking for the most gameplay possible as you could possibly ask for. Now, I did just rant a little bit about our bad variance in places, but don't get it twisted, we had good variance in places too. It all evens out in the end, not in any one event, but overall. But yeah, it just feels like it's just... You guys know how optimistic I always am about BGX, and don't get me wrong, it's still totally fine to play, but it just feels like we have got punished one too many times with one too many printings. Just Urza, fine. Just Oko, fine. Just Veil of Summer, horrendous idea to make that card, but fine. But when they all come together, and then when you've got these alternative Bant Snow control decks where they're just packing Oko and Veil of Summer plus a lot of stuff that's already neck and neck with our value, it just feels like there's just a little bit too much that punishes us in the format right now. Don't think we're unplayable at all. Think it's totally a fine deck, but I have long thought BG Rock was underrated in most metas. I don't know if it's underrated anymore. I think Rock and Jund right now are fairly rated. That's how I'd say. So the broad community's perception of them, I think, is accurate rather than underrating them a little bit. And it is because of the ubiquity of Veil of Summer. You look at even good matchups for us like Infect. They've all got 4 Veil of Summer in the board. So yes, we can still beat them. Yes, they can still get hosed hard by Plague Engineer, but they can also just destroy our traditional interaction with the 1-mana Veil. It's insane. Really hate it. Really hope it doesn't last, but that's a tangent for a different day to go down that rabbit hole perhaps. So there you go, my friends. I tried to speed through these as quickly as possible because it was 21 games that I just showed you in replay form, while also slowing down at the right places, explaining the lines fully. I'm very tired from doing this, and I hope it was worth it for you. I hope you got your enjoyment and your edification out of it as always. I am going to be bringing you some Mono Red Prowess content next, because that deck, I think, is actually very well positioned. I've been playing it on the side, and I am 20-5 in my last 5 leagues. Just literally 4-1ing every single league. And that is awesome. That's fun. So, Mono Red Prowess up next. Also be reviewing Theros Beyond Death spoilers as they come out. So stay tuned to the channel. Once we're done with a few Mono Red Prowess videos, probably 2, we'll be going back to BGX. As always, we got more donation leagues coming up as always. If you're interested in a donation league, you can follow my link to Patreon. One of the most recent posts is me explaining exactly how they work if you're not sure. You can also check out, since you're already in the description looking at my Patreon page, BrianPalmerArt.com for all of your token and playmat needs. Thank you to all Patreon supporters so much. I love you guys. And hey, this was a successful challenge, all things considered. Considering the matchups, considering some of the variants, considering the fact that Rock has not been putting up results lately, we snuck in at 32nd, we got published, we went positive, we'll take it. We had some great games as well. So thanks again for watching, hope you enjoyed it. As always, let me know in the comments what you think about what you saw here, and I will talk to you soon. Hope everybody out there has a wonderful day.